It is now 5 o'clock exactly. I'm going to call us to order on December 4th, 2024. And this District of Columbia Board of Education working session is now called to order. The working session is being streamed live on the State Board's YouTube page, and members of the public can view there. Okay, the roll. We now call the roll. We will now call the roll to determine there is a quorum. Executive Director Butler, please call the roll.
Representative Barnes.
Present.
Representative Lynn. Representative Mayor.
Present.
Representative Ting.
Present.
Representative Best. Representative Chang. Representative Goulet.
Here.
Representative Henderson.
Present.
Representative O'Leary.
Here.
Representative Reed.
Present.
Representative Williams.
Present.
Representative Patterson.
Present.
Representative Thompson.
Present.
Mr. Vice President, you have to.
All right, a quorum has been determined and the State Board will now proceed with this meeting. Again, welcome to our December working session. President Thompson is joining us via Zoom from Denver. Hello, Madam President, where she is attending the Education Commission of the state winter meeting. President Thompson, do you have a leadership report to share?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. It's not evening here. A couple things I want to highlight. First, I want to direct folks to our executive director's report because there is a lot of information in there. We are now, it's me saying like these are the meetings coming up. That is now in Director Butler's report. So I do want to highlight the difference. And so I want folks to look there for that. So you will not see that at the bottom of my leadership report anymore. I am at ECS. I look forward to sharing out from the commissioners meeting later, maybe not this meeting, but I don't know, next meeting. We will have someone from ECS on our public meeting panel next week. They are a good resource to us, and it sounds like they should also have some really good tools around 50-state comparisons with regard to educator retention that should be coming out and other supports that they can offer to the board. So I want to always remind folks of the supports that ECS can offer us as a full board. A few things I want to highlight. Member transition and celebration. So there have been a lot of calendar invites. Some of them have been sitting on calendars and in inboxes since October. So please take a moment and go through the different calendar invitations because we have a few as the end of the year actively approaches. I want to highlight that at the celebration of service, this is the first time we're having a celebration of service. It is both to recognize outgoing elected members for their service. We will also have some of our recently departed student members in attendance. And for the first time, we will have, I don't know what that was. For the first time, we will have an inaugural award recognizing either an individual or organization that honors Mary Levy's legacy. This person or org does have to uphold educational equity, data and transparency, and of course, impactful policy analysis. There's a link for nominations in Director Butler's email. It is a pretty quick nominations form, but I do want all members to think about if there are folks who would meet this standard. I believe the deadline is December 9th for submissions. I do want to apologize for us sharing details later than expected. I want to recognize that especially Director Butler and the staff have been doing their best to work with OCP to get all the approvals before we rolled out any information to the public or partners or members. And so we finally have approvals and can share this. SAC support. A couple times over the last few months, Director Butler has emailed and text folks asking members to support the SAC with snacks. Some members have responded and said, yes, I will support with snacks. Quite frankly, with growing SAC membership, It is a bit unsustainable for us as staff members and some handful of members to support this. We're going to have to rotate this responsibility. If others have ideas about how we can defray this cost, definitely open to them. But we want to make sure that we continue to provide our students with sustenance since they come to us directly after school. And so I'm going to again ask that when Director Butler reaches out, that folks are responsive to that, will contribute to that. And when they say they're going to contribute, actually make the contribution, because that is the next leap. Again, would love any feedback around how we can do better around this. But now that we have several dozen students on the SAC, it is not sustainable for one or two people to be coming out of pocket every month. And unfortunately, we have continued to have challenges with OCP on spending board funds around this. I do want to flag one council testimony that was not on the list of hearings that Chairman Mendelson shared with us, which is about Eagle Academy. At our most recent leadership meeting, we discussed that it would be helpful if we did provide an agency testimony, really to highlight the work that OSA and the UMBA staff leaned in immediately after Eagle's closure to support families at resource fairs and with individual concerns. Unfortunately, I think it's fair for us to anticipate that we may have other schools who are in this situation. And I think there are some valuable lessons learned from these offices about how we can better support families. Since that was not on the initial hearing list, I do want to flag that if folks have thoughts, feel free to just respond back to my email. And there's also a friendly reminder. I want to thank all the members who have shown up and testified either virtually or in person before the council as individuals. And I want to give a friendly reminder to please also email our staff when you provide those testimonies. They're very helpful, not only because we publish them to the website so folks can know where members stand on things, but because they also help us share future testimonies from the board. You know, we note things like this in our annual report, and I always want to make sure we are giving credit where credit is due. And we have had some very active and informed members before the council. Budget themes, closing the loop on a couple of items. So one, we were late in transmitting our budget priorities letter. We initially had laid out a timeline. We got some additional member feedback, which came in later than expected. And then, of course, have had a few testimonies that the staff have been diligently preparing for. But we do want to make sure the letter, as far as the state board's 6 budget priorities, are transmitted. We believe we should be able to show that this week. I do want to thank everybody for their input and flexibility with the adjusted timeline. I also want to thank our office leads for preparing our agency budget documents and having what we anticipate was a promising meeting. I'm going to call it promising with the mayor's team about our agency budget. More to be shared in the admin update because those things do go through our admin committee. But I do want folks to know that that meeting has happened. Folks should have also seen an email from Director Butler that our resolution around the standalone education committee has been transmitted. We have not received any responses to my knowledge, but if we do, we will make sure to share them with all members. Last thing I want to flag, Representative Chang recently inquired about the possibility of a conversation with Attorney General Swab and incoming Shadow Senator Ankit Jain about possibilities for education under the new presidential administration. I know I personally have received questions at community meetings and then got a call this weekend from the mayor's office about anything we were hearing or anything we were thinking as the SBOE given some of our President-elect statements about the Department of Education in particular. It would be really helpful to know if others are hearing these kind of questions or requests, and if there are helpful voices or resources in addition to the ones that Representative Chang recommended that we might want to engage. I would also like us to talk about possibly during new business, how we might explore this topic as a board. And so I just want to flag that because we did get an email from Representative Chang, but also I got a call from the mayor's office and never want to speak out of turn. And so those are the things I wanted to flag in the leadership report. Are there questions, comments, or other feedback?
No, I mean, I think I understood most of that, just the last part around the concern from the mayor's office. Can you give more context to that?
Yeah, I don't think it's really, I shouldn't say concern. I think I wanted to know, or the person who reached out to me asked if we were hearing concerns and if there was anything that the board as a whole had planned to engage around this topic. And so I could only speak to the fact that, yes, I have heard some questions at community meetings, but I could not speak to what the large board thought or felt. And that was, I feel like it was maybe more of an informal question, but I do understand that some formal questions and conversations may be coming. And I want us to be prepared for that. I also just think it's generally, and this is my individual perspective, I think it's generally helpful if we can just have share information that just educates people about, what's real, what's imagined, given a lot of the uncertainty as we have a new administration coming in. And so just curious if others are receiving those types of questions at ANC meetings or civic association meetings or in passing even.
Discussion now or new business?
I'm suggesting we have a discussion in new business, but I wanted to clarify since I mentioned that I got a call from the mayor's office because I don't, because Representative Williams asked for further context.
Is the silence that we don't think that this is worthwhile to pursue, or that we're, generally interested?
Maybe I should ask a more pointed question. I think it would be helpful to know if others would be interested in having some type of discussion in new business. Yes or no.
Any other questions?
I don't have any questions. I'm interested in discussion.
Okay, thank you. Were there any questions at this current time for President? Sure. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
I will now turn to our executive director, Ms. Butler, for her report.
Good evening, members of the DC State Board. Over the past month, we have participated in our agency's budget review meeting with the mayor's budget team and officially submitted our FY26 budget. We are interviewing applicants for our human resources FTE and hope to make an offer within the next week. I hope to have someone onboarded in that position by the end of the first quarter of this fiscal year. In addition to preparing for our recurring meetings, SBOE is preparing to host new member orientation for our newly elected members and our first ever celebration service award ceremony honoring our outgoing members, not our members. We have begun to work on the 2024 annual report and are preparing for a January vote at the public meeting. You all will receive the draft once we return back in January. Please be sure to check your inboxes for my monthly updates and news. We will be taking the 2025-2027 board photos on December 17th at the MLK Library. You should have those dates and locations on your calendars. If you would like to take headshots, please just let us know. We can make the photographer available for those individual shots as well. Please prioritize the completion of the spring retreat survey and the nomination for the Maryland Education Advocacy Award. Lastly, you should have received invitations to the EdFest directly from OSBI and the Youth Town Hall sponsored by the DC Coalition for Girls. They are hoping to get elected officials from the state board and from the council there. The SAC will co-host this event with them. We are hoping that the state board can attend and participate on January 22nd at Trinity Washington University. Please note that our offices will be closed for the holidays beginning December 23rd through January 1st. That concludes mine.
Thank you, Director Bosler. Do any of the members have any questions about the executive director report?
Question about, the HR person. So the end of the first quarter is a couple of weeks away.
Yes.
So you think you're gonna have somebody by then?
The finalist interview on Friday, I already have references and I've already done the assessment. I want to make an offer by Tuesday. And so we have an opportunity based on DCHR, new employee orientation. The last day we could onboard someone is actually December 30th. The DC government, that is, so I think it's possible. And I'm holding out hope. I mean, I can't say who the two finalists are. But one of them is a DC government employee, which makes onboarding a little bit easier. It's much more of a transfer than sort of like a, do all the other paperwork for them.
Is it possible we know at our next meeting?
Who the candidate is? Yes, it is possible. But yes,
And, it says December 17th that Martin Luther King went out there.
yes,
Now, the thing, the outgoing, whatever that. thing
it's the 18th,
Okay, I just want.
yes.
Thanks.
It just-
I know I'm not. sure.
You have a 24 book club meeting.
No, we have a AP review.
Oh, AP.
Other questions for the director?
I don't have a question, just a comment. I'm really excited that we're finally gonna have this HR position. I want to just thank Bernice for all the time that has gone into not just hiring this person, but being our HR officer up until this point. It's a really big step for the agency, and so just super excited that we can finally have this come to fruition. Thank you.
Any last any last questions? Board members? All right, thank you.
Wanda,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
all are also all invited to the meeting of the location, not have to come, but if you are all invited, if you plan to come, please let me know, because if there are more than 5 of you current members, we would need to post the meeting, those type of things. But you're invited, and it's a very easy thing for us to do, but we just need to know in advance that you're going to be there so that we can follow the appropriate procedures.
Yes, thank you so much. We always want to make sure we're transparent and compliant. Okay, next on our agenda is a debrief of the November public meeting panel on education and civil rights. Members, you have in your materials a summary document with key highlights from that panel. You members have any questions or next step that you would like to raise? Please keep your comments, questions, and next steps related to the testimony, because we'll be talking about other parts later, and the discussion with the panelists themselves. We will discuss additional steps toward civil rights as the education and civil rights during the working group updates. So there will be a time to talk about those things at that point. But we want to talk about the briefing itself. If you have questions, comments pertaining to the panel meetings. Not giving hands yet. Go right ahead.
I do think it was a little confusing, that they were talking about the measure, and not having that language in front of us or in front of the public. I appreciated the perspectives. Like I've been concerned about like the unintended consequences aspect of the election, so I really appreciated their speaking to those. I appreciated the composition of the.
Yes, sir.
I think one thing that we need to do, well, you need to do, is, really come up with a definition of what high quality means. Because, we had at the same time an ordinance, and we're talking about the portfolio and storage and things like that. And, look at the last thing on the back page, where it says, for instance, if a group of students can prove that they lack access to a high quality public school, court can issue an injunction requires the DC State Board of Education to correct the deficiencies that prevent their current school from being high quality, or to provide the students access to a different high quality public school. We don't have any.
That authority does not rely within our state board the way that it's configured. It may in other states.
Yeah, but this one says
Yeah.
that an injunction that requires the DC State Board of Education. You know, when we get something, an injunction telling us that we're gonna do anything, it's completely against the charter. That's a big problem. Because whatever that means, from being high quality, and then provide access to a different high quality public school. This what does high quality mean? Does it mean test scores? Does it mean what they offer to students? Before we start working on a resolution, I think we need to come up with what a high quality is.
For me, I know we a kind of a report out from the working group, so to speak, but I think it is real relevant to bring up Representative O'Leary, because those are things that we'll continue to do even before you leave, and talk about and try to define that as a group and what that means for us. I think it's incumbent on all of us to kind of say, this is what we agree as a state board, if we're going to issue a resolution at some point, what that, how, if defining that, and exactly what will be the caveats of not, if meeting that definition, and if that definition is not met.
See, the problem is this amorphous definition of what high quality means. That's gonna take more than a couple of conversations.
Yes, sir.
When will we talk about the topic broadly, not just the panel?
We'll talk about that, when the report out on, that's for the end.
Okay.
So we just want to talk about the panel itself, and some of the things that they brought up. If there was something germane that we really wanted to speak to about what they said.
I think one thing that stood out from the panel for me, and I won't get into some of the questions I have for next steps until later, then is around the response and what we can actually do once we actually get this flagged, right? And how effective that is and what teeth that has, right? And I heard a mix of this is symbolic, but gives a pathway, right, to at least raise an issue, in which case I really want to question the value of the amount of work that I put into that, if that is the case. And then if it does have to, right, where does that open itself for a lot of other trouble, right, actually? And so I think it was nice to hear sort of how other states are thinking about both of those pathways, but I think either way, I have a lot more questions.
I want to delve into next steps. That was an important thing that I think was really helpful cross section of people with experiences and perspectives. So I thought it was really helpful for me to get here. And it gave me a lot of ideas back to it. So just we should get together and bring a big group to the board. I thought it was very useful. So I'll save everything else to the actual discussion.
I appreciate you giving me that, but I'm going to point out to Jen, who was a staffer on this and did such an excellent job of keeping us focused as we go on, and then bringing different names to us to have our panel around that panel out. I suggested some names. She brought some more names that made it a rich conversation. So I got to give you props. I appreciate you, Representative Okulay, but I truly appreciate the work that she's done.
Thank you, Kathleen Coughlin as well, who is at home sick tonight.
Yeah.
But yes, we got a lot of suggestions from, as usual, from several members. We always invite multiple people, knowing that 5 is the most we can have on the live panel. And it's kind of a balance from there, who's available, who brings varying perspectives and things like that. But yes, thank you everyone for your suggestions as always.
I appreciate that. I want to recognize our president who has her hand up.
Hey, I know we're gonna discuss the larger, during the larger working group report out. I think I had, two thoughts. One, I know that Education Trust initially, was invited to be a panelist, and I had inquired, to see if they could still provide us, written testimony, because they said it was a substantial topic. And I tend to value, their opinion from like a national perspective. One of the things I looked at, was which states already have education as a civil right, and some of them, don't have the greatest proficiency. And I totally understand the goal around proficiency, but I also just want to get a sense of like what's out there, and that would be, great to hear from them. So that was my first thought on the panel. Two, I do think it actually would be really helpful, to follow up with panelists who mentioned unintended consequences, if they could just go a little bit more in depth, about what, folks should be considering. Because if we put forward something as a board, I think not just the why, I'm very clear on, why this could be important. I think the how, is important, and would love to talk about the what, which Representative O'Leary highlighted, which is what is a high quality education. But I'll wait for that during the report out. But that would be my feedback as far as the panel. I would also just in general, continue to encourage, folks who do have, feedback, whether, positive, negative questions, to testify at our public meeting coming up. Because I think it's important that that we are always having a conversation and inviting multiple perspectives. And I feel like I've heard some things individually, but I want to make sure, that we as members, are having a shared conversation as we make decisions. So that would be my, feedback on the panel.
Thank you, Madam President. Were there other questions I could hand raise already, Representative?
And just a quick thing for me was, I was a little bit, like, in addition to the unintended consequences as people were bringing up, I was still a little bit unclear about what would happen if, like, what are the checks and balances to prevent an unfunded mandate? Like, if a judge issues that a school should do blah, 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 that there simply isn't enough money. And like, would there be people working with it? Would the judge have to like work with the school administrator to look at the budget, et cetera?
I love that question because I know I've heard from other, cities in the district, what does that actually mean if it's the financial, kind of response to it, and you're mandating something for a particular LEA. So I think that's a great question. I think that's something that still continues to have to be, kind of vetted out, if we're going to put more investigation. Other questions?
I don't have any questions. I think just one idea that was salient for me, from both the panelists and from some of the responses, like from, some of the, like the executive director of pain and other folks, was how we want to think about this holistically as a system, not just about DCPS, but whatever we're doing here should apply, should take into account both sectors of the system. I think there's definitely a lot to be thought about in terms of the timing, and the potential, consequences intended or unintended, that may stem from action.
I agree with you, Representative Williams. If we're gonna say, even though we have a bifurcated system, ecosystem, we have one ecosystem, when it comes to our children, our parents. And so if it applies to one sector, I agree with you, that we need to look at how that applies to the other sector. It cannot be bifurcated. So I think those are conversations that will come up in the crafter of resolution. As we talk about that later, that would be something that we have to address. So I agree. Other comments? All right. I appreciate the rich comments. I think, as we move forward and we get ready to talk about it later and, working meeting, kind of like report, there'll be other things that we can dig in a little bit more. So I appreciate all of that. With that being said, we're going to move to committee reports. That's our agenda reports. Each committee chair will provide an update which will be followed by members' questions. Okay, and it seems as if, and I have to pull this report out, that I'm first up with administrative, thank you, Director Bell. With my report, so to speak, that's what I share, okay? So, administrative report, we met on November 22nd. In attendance was myself, Evan Rose Thompson, Allison Chang, Athletic Director, and Dan, from the Student Advocacy Office. Some of the highlights is the Executive Director and, our student advocates share their update on, basically on some budget requests. The meeting with the mayor's office and the team on November 15th. If you have questions, you can ask the questions later about some of the content of that. There was office updates, for State Board of Education office update. We've already heard this, but I'll repeat it again because it was part of the administrative meeting, that you're interviewing for the HR specialist applications. Going through those particular times at a certain stage. We also, State Board members, sent invitations to attend the youth town hall. And staff has begun the offboarding process for members and engaged, incoming members. So as we've already said, you know, we've already talked to, rebuilding our certain ways about those who will be leaving us. And we're also communicating with those who are joining us in the new year in return. For the Office of the Student Advocate, he just reported that they're fully staffed finally, but they are recruiting for a new graduate. So that's one thing that they're good for. And if you don't know and you haven't heard and you're just blind to everything that's going on, he also talked about the Ed Fest. Everybody should know at this particular time, Ed Fest is Saturday. The first one is Saturday. Hopefully you can come out. This one's about the high school. I know I will be there in two capacities because I do have an 8th grader. So I'll be there in that capacity, and then I'll also be there, you know, as a person serving the state and talking to people, things like that. So I'm looking forward to that process. And seeing people there, I hope everybody will attend so they'll have the opportunity to engage us. I'm under the understanding we will have a there, that's correct.
Yeah, so we do have a booth. I think we'll have Dan,
Andrew, Darren, and Corinne.
and
I'm next weekend.
yeah, I think we're split, but we will be at both also. So you will see all of the full agency. I think all 3 offices are there. So you'll be able to see us all.
Thank you. And remember, as you said, there are 2. There's the high schools on Saturday, and then we do pre-K 3 through 8th grade the following week. Okay, and those are just as important. So please try to make those and prioritize those on your calendar, because I'm sure that's the best way that we can engage with the parents that we serve. One final thing, I'm asking that the executive director will analyze the pay of accepted service employees of foreign DC government and compare State Board of Education salaries before our performance and budget hearing in early calendar year 2025. One thing I like to state, because I know this is somebody who can be in DC government on the other side and stuff like that, there's a lot of accepted services who do not get codes, things of that nature. That is very hard for employees who sit in jobs for a long period of time. That the unions get them increases, the economy has inflation, and they're sitting with the same salary year after year. So we want to try to, and we know this is a DC policy for accepted service, but we want to make sure that we advocate for them to get an increase, see what that looks like, to make comparisons across certain job titles and as we call them, like little streams of cycles, like what they're called, that they're in. And so that's what Bernice is going to look at, and then we're going to try to advocate very hard for increases. So that's very important to me. I understand, I get it. We appreciate the work you guys do, and we want to advocate for you guys to be paid appropriately. So that's the end of my report. I'm going to, if there's questions, first before I move to the next. Okay, seeing none, next up is college careers and life readiness.
Thank you. So at our last meeting, we discussed our initial reactions, responses to the OSCE presentation on high school graduation requirements. We mostly have questions from that, and we decided that we would try to collect some of those questions to share with OSCE, and we will extend an invitation to the broader board to pass on any, questions that they have from that initial, first look that Audrey gave us. With the health and physical education standards coming out, we talked about how we might do engagement, and Kathleen had been working with Andrew on a strategy for how to try to get some feedback from the public without requiring the public to ingest the full standards, because they're pretty substantial, but to try to get kind of big picture desires from the public for what they would like to see in the standards, and then we could do the work of making sure that those values are reflected in the actual standards. And then we talked a bit more about the idea of civics week, and to talk about next steps, we concluded that we need to do a little bit of outreach with educators to see what exactly they would need in order to do a civics week at their school, so that we make sure that we're spending our time appropriately to give whatever it is that is needed to do that, whether it's lesson plans or some other resource. So we're going to start reaching out to some educators to get that. I think that's it.
All right, are there questions?
Yes, one point, so Representative, thank you for continuing to stay focused with the civics week piece. I know that it also came up in our committee meeting around like voter registration. Just one point of notice with, I'm still meeting with the League of Women Voters somewhat infrequently right now, and they have interest in being involved in that. So as the committee develops ideas on what that could look like, I think it'd be great to involve them in those conversations. I definitely support the idea of getting educator feedback as well, but just want to flag that community partner for that work.
Thank you, Representative. Are there other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
President Thompson has.
President Thompson, I apologize, President Thompson, go right ahead,
Looking forward to the questions around the high school graduation requirements work. We have Tuesday, I think. When do we have our meeting? Tuesday. Tuesday, we found out that our meeting with Aussie is moved. And so I think we're looking at, y'all gonna get me the line, the after the, I know it's after the public meeting. I think December 20th will be the date. So any questions from the committee that we can lift up, it would be really helpful. Also, excited to hear more about the service week. But I just wanted to flag that about the questions.
Thank you, Madam President. And
Have all-
Director Butler.
So in talking about the high school education, high school or health and physical education standard, have you all talked about potentially a public meeting panel? Because I know they're gonna do open comment in January on the standards.
We could be to talk about that. I think it's not here to check.
I would just suggest that, I'm just gonna put it out there. I feel like Kathleen would be in line with me. Because I know that they did mention at the last, which is in our, we know that, they were gonna put them out for public comment in January after, somewhere around, I think from the 15th of January to the 14th of February. And so we are having a meeting in February. That would be a good time to do a panel on this topic.
Very much. Other comments, questions regarding this committee?
Sorry, also if the committee has, or members have ideas around what engagement could or should look like around either of those topics, that would be helpful. As Executive Director Butler said, there is a window for public comment, but I would like us to think about like how we encourage public comment. I know I really appreciate Andrew just trying to create more avenues for us to lift up what's happening and communicate with the public. but we have often seen that during public comment, we're not getting the most robust response. And so in addition to a panel, we'd love for folks to think about how we get a greater response from folks. Or even if we want, as a board, again, to like send official feedback and how we gather that.
Thank you, Madam President. Okay, see any other hands at this particular time on screen or in person? So I'm going to move us to the next committee report from Representative O'Leary. Educator excellence.
You have the notes in front of you. I'm not gonna read them. But we're really looking forward to the resolution at our meeting next week for induction and mentoring program for new teachers in the District of Columbia. There aren't any programs in the system right now, not universal. And the way that all the information we got from testimony in our meetings and also from the panels is everyone wants this, but nobody's moving on it. So I think this is very important that we do this. So you have the information there. And also next, we'll have a cell phone panel next week. I would like to encourage all members, please talk to your constituents about testifying as public testimony next week. Because we really are looking for a plethora of information about different things that are happening as far as cell phones in the classroom. I don't think that we want to say there shouldn't be any this or there should be this or that. We want to get as much information that we can get so that there can be a system that has some kind of regularity throughout all of our schools. As of right now, we haven't been able to get DCPS to volunteer a person to tell us what's going on in DCPS as the largest LEA. Am I wrong about that? Okay, and also, so I'm still gonna try to get somebody on this panel, but we really want this panel to be as dynamic, not just a panel. We want this whole testimony to be as dynamic as possible so that they can give us information about what's best for the system as far as cell phone use in the classroom. I'll leave it at that. Yes, sir.
Is the teachers union going to be sending a representative to speak on behalf of?
We have someone from the teachers union here.
Not currently on the expert panel, but it's possible they have signed up as a public witness.
I don't know if it's too late. I mean, to me, that would be one of the most helpful viewpoints to hear from, because on the issue of cell phones, that's where I feel like there's the most immediate impact. It's on our teachers who are trying to teach students. So to kind of get a cross section from our teachers on how they feel about the impact cell phones are having, either positive or negative, on the learning environment, me would be really fantastic to kind of get that perspective, and then they would be able to speak for their members. So that would be something that I think would be very, very useful for me. And then also, if we could, I know the charter schools all will have their independent positions on this, but to see if we can get a representative, either from the charter school alliance or somebody who can
So
speak.
we already have that.
Oh, we do. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, but I'll volunteer to make a couple calls to the teachers union.
And
I want to
also,
go in order. Go right in.
well, I'll send, when I send around the agenda, members will be able to see the panelists that we have confirmed. And if anyone else hears from someone, please let me know, because again, we can only have 5. We have 3 currently. We're working to secure a student who serves on our student advisory committee, so that would be 4. So we are running low on space on the expert panel. But so just please stay in contact with me as you're talking to folks.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Keep it orderly. Madam President, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I had some to do follow-up items for this panel. So I did follow up with Chancellor Farabee, and they are reconsidering our request. I understand that they already have policy, consistent policy around middle schools, and so I'm hoping they are able to go on the record and share what that is. And it would be also helpful to get a scan from them about like just in general who has what or some of promising practices. And so I'm going to stay in contact with Chancellor Farabee around that because I do think it is helpful if they testify. I've also followed up with Pat Brantley of Friendship, and so she has offered their CA, the Chief Academic Officer, or someone else, since they are also a large LEA with policies, and so it looks like we are, and not that and we can make happy to defer to the committee around what testimonies they would like written versus in person, but actively supporting those requests.
Thank you, Mayor. And I saw a comment from Representative Beth. I don't know if he wanted to say that out loud for those maybe watching, but he put something in the chat regarding it. Representative Beth?
Yeah, and I realize that this isn't actually the time or the place for it, but I did want to just stress that, I don't think that we should be making the policy, but I do believe that we should be stressing that each school should have one, and we should be making sure that we're saying that the school should connect with the teachers, families, and the students for that. But I realize that this isn't the place for it right now, but I did want to stress that.
Were there other comments, questions? All right. Thank you so much. We will now move to our student advisor report.
I think that's me. Okay, that's me. Okay, sorry. That's all right. Student advisory. So we met on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, a week after the election, and on theme, our icebreaker was about civic engagement. Specifically, we asked a few questions to see if our youth were like engaged and knew what was going on, given, politics was a big thing in the news as of then. So we had 36 members attending, and our icebreaker questions included, what does civic engagement mean to you? And some of the responses were being an active participant in the community and being aware of your political environment, engaging in the community, going to town halls, neighborhood meetings, voting, democracy, advocating, etc. Then we asked how many teachers, since the start of the school year, how many of your teachers have had civic engagement conversations or lessons in class? And 75% had at least one teacher who had civic engagement conversations or lessons. And of the 25% who said no teachers had ever talked about civic engagement the entire year, many thought it was because they thought the teachers were too afraid to talk about politics in class. One recommendation was for principals to provide assurances that teachers are safe to talk about civic engagement, even if it is written in standards. And students also raised an issue where they were not learning about the importance of voting before election days. Specifically, students felt like voted like early voting, mail-in voting, etc. To what extent are students at your school civically engaged? Out of 32 responses, 57% said most or all of the students at their school are civically engaged, and about a third, 34%, said only a few are civically engaged. Do you feel like students have a good understanding of your rights and civic responsibilities? There's an even split between people who said yes and no. And how can schools better foster civic engagement inside or outside the classroom? And responses included encouraging voting for older students, allowing students to vote and share thoughts on changes inside their schools, which would be like student government and stuff. Allocating time for community service in the school day and simple class assignments about current events. So making like assignments and space within school to talk about civic engagement. Inside the classroom, whole class discussion of the state of our country, for example, election updates and current event projects. Outside the classroom, mandatory community service / engagement. There was a lively debate on whether civic engagement and community service activities should be mandated. And students also raised that schools should have time in the school curriculum to hold civic debates during class time. So those were some recommendations. Then we began to shift towards more like forward thinking. So we ranked our top 4 annual report topics, and we got into groups for each section. So in our annual report, the top 4 topics for the sections would be financial literacy, college career and life readiness, curriculum and knowledge, and mental health. Then we also wanted to do an SAC project in addition to the report, and that would be a town hall. And we also want to collaborate with clubs, including Youth in Government, the Sunrise Movement, the Student Government Association, the MICFA Challenge, and Black student unions and Asian student unions. And finally, we got our hoodies, and the next meeting will be Monday, December 9th, which is next week. Any questions?
Questions? For the committee? Not seeing any as of yet. Call questions again.
I'm curious how the,
Go right ahead.
how the, those 4 topics rose to the top and what other topics you considered.
I think if I remember correctly, some of the other ones were student safety as well as general ones. I think it was, yeah, curriculum knowledge is one of them. There was another one that was similar to curriculum knowledge. I think, there's also like teacher well-being, I think was one of them. And so we just did ranked choice voting, and it was pretty close.
Thank you very much. You guys see any other questions? So I'm going to move to Representative Williams for student experience and engagement.
Yes, thank you. Everyone has the committee report in front of them. I'm gonna highlight a couple main things and I have a couple of questions from members as to how the committee moves forward with our committee research around attendance. One of the things is based off of the work of Representative Mayor and in response to some of the concerns for the Green New Deal, the committee voted unanimously to move forward on addressing HVAC issues in schools. The bottom part of the resolution really summarizes the most important part, which is to prioritize HVAC maintenance, both for combating increasing heat and declining air quality, but also for improving the conditions of learning within schools. That was something that the committee voted unanimously on. There's another resolution that the committee is working on that we voted to wait for further community input after the January public meeting around indoor air quality. That is still a priority for the committee, but we wanted to move that timely in the new year. Additionally, the committee has been concerned primarily on truancy and chronic absenteeism. We had some challenges with pushing out our survey earlier on this fall, and Darren and I had a meeting with some folks at the Education Research Collaborative. They said they'd be happy to partner with us and that they can help to kind of get this done in a more efficient way, depending on the scope of the research. So I have 3 questions that I'd like to ask for folks' input on. I'll name them all, and then if people could weigh in briefly. One is, are people generally in support, or what thoughts do we have around partnering with the Education Research Collaborative? 2, are we okay with narrowing the scope to something that, if we were to partner with them, could be more manageable and timely? Because the goal of the committee was to try to get something produced before the budget is finalized, so we can direct resources on this issue in the upcoming school year. And then 3, given that 2 of the members of the committee, Representative O'Leary and Representative Reed, are not going to be with us next year, should we hold off on this until January, or should we try to make a decision on this in the interim? So I'll go kind of one by one, but do other members feel that it would be worthwhile to partner with the Education Research Collaborative around this issue?
Could you say more about what the partnership would entail? I mean, I generally am supportive, but I want to know what I'm supporting.
I think part of it is that they have a broad bench of like different researchers, particularly on particular issues that could support SBOE staff in this. And then on top of that, they have like access to a lot of data that could make the data gathering process way more efficient, particularly if we went with a route of looking at like well-being in connection to school data and access to Panorama, or if knowing like what research topics have already been chosen so that we could do something that complements the work that's already been done.
What comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not-
Go right ahead.
Oh, go first.
I mean, I think it would be helpful to utilize them as a resource. When I was on the collaborative before Representative Henderson was in the position for state board, they were having a hard time like finding meaningful research, but also finding research that they were able to do that was like cost effective. That makes
Right,
sense. Like they were
yeah.
trying to get buckets of research out the door, but it was also like they had, some financial restrictions. But I think if you're gonna do the collaboration, you might wanna partner also with them into, like I saw, I think some of your preview questions, like you might wanna have them be a part of your question development.
We've been going back and forth.
Okay,
on that,
yeah.
Yeah.
Just to like, get in the partnership and they're like, actually, we can't get this data, so.
No, I tried to go the reverse process because I think the committees we looked at prioritizing the like schools with above 50% chronic absenteeism. And with running into issues with it being IRB approval, it's just way more intensive to get student input. So I'm now kind of backwards planning that by seeing what they can do, bring those ideas back to the whole board. So we can see what we would like to prioritize and then go from there, so we know whatever we choose can get done.
Right. And I guess, I'm sorry, in general, as an exiting member, and it's not about like doing the research, but I will keep saying what I said in the committee meetings, that like, I would love to see some sort of implementation related to our attendance issue. Like, it's been a lot of like studying and mesmerizing, or like, looking at the issue. But like, I don't know if I've seen or can like say what an actual intervention has, and that's beyond our solution, not beyond our, so that's within our education community partners of like what actually have been implemented, what have been the results, like can we also study that or get clarity from policy of what interventions have been put in place related to attendance?
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny you mentioned that, and I'll kind of double dip briefly, because I have to leave around the external committees. One of the ideas that came up too with the Everyday Counts Force, which Representative Mayor and I were on, was that some of the intervention process that we have, the third step, which is outside of just getting an excused absence or unexcused absence, is to report students with 10 to 15 absences, to figure out some outside agency intervention. There's no feedback loop of that information coming back to schools, and that's why the city has taken the approach to partner with the Department of Health. So that was kind of alarming to me that we are following those processes, but like the first intervention is like the only intervention right now, and then we have a lot of outside groups working on it, but we need to focus on what that intervention process looks like, because that's part of the problem. That makes sense.
You can defer to a member.
The executive.
We're in line, so, okay, yes.
I did hear Darren ask, not as in depth as you all discussed it, because that would be sharing with you all meeting. I think one of the things that would be really great is to partner with the Education Research Collaborative. Is to think about it from the perspective of how can they enhance our or expand our research capability to produce research in a timely way. And do they have the capacity, to like, for example, would DCPS be willing to share like panorama data with them from what necessary the DCPS is already implementing, the students will already be taking, and then maybe couple that with the attendance report that is from OSCE and be able to do focus groups. And that's like this, and then like be able to do an analysis for the state board on that. That could be something that, those are two pieces of research or data that will already have data points, like they would talk about student well-being. I'm assuming I have not seen the general survey, but from what I've heard around SEL, I think, but part of the limitations to that is like how much of that is applicable to both DCPS and to charter. I don't know if the charter is just a DCPS. Yeah, so that's why I said, we just, whatever the research is, you have to find something that cuts across both sectors in a way that's gonna be meaningful.
And I know Panorama is being distributed this year to charters, so that data should be available later on. Know exactly what.
Representative O'Leary.
I have a question When does Ossie's report come?
The attendance report?
Report card, which whatever you want to call
The attendance report should come out, I think, in February or March.
it. But it came out in November last year.
Yeah, the attendance report is out.
Yeah, the one for this, the one for the end of last school year that they just came out.
Yes, they just put out one. It's in there, the Oxford notes, and it's linked to all of their reports, and they provide all of their data sheets and the request of. So
So-
essentially,
So the research thing could look at last year's attendance figures and look at this year's attendance figures. And let us know what the problem is.
well, I don't know if reports identify a problem, so much as they share data. So they say, this is what the
It's
data is.
65%.
Well, I don't know why the Oxford report does that, but I don't think they don't try to come up with causes for the truancy data or the absentee
Right.
data.
They just.
They just
I'm just
report the
interested
data.
in whether or not there was any change. I haven't seen the report.
It was through, overall across the board, 3 to 4% decrease. But it's still out like
That's
that.
not a change.
Well, that's part of the narrative that we're talking about, yeah. Yeah. So I think, like, my commitment to the board and to working with the committee is to continue to kind of update folks on what particular questions we could pursue. We're not gonna, like, make a commitment to work with the Education Leadership Collaborative without broader board buy-in. Do people think that, like, Darren and I as committee chair and as SBOE staff should continue to try and push that forward, or should we wait for new, like, committee makeup in the new year, to move forward? I'm just trying to, like, because we'll have a couple of student representatives, but we'll be represented by myself after the year.
Oh, that's my question is the holidays are coming, then the holidays do the integration and okay, just realistically, even if you had all of the committee members, would you all still be able to get a massive amount done and decided between now and the inauguration time? Especially, I mean, I just don't know, but just realistically, so it may not be that long of a wait.
Okay.
But also the goal is to hopefully have the board not wait until like we go to the year
What I would say to that is that we've had, issues or initiatives that we work on that transcends 2 different terms. And it may not be the same committee name, but the work itself continues on as they reconstitute a new committee, so to speak, with new members and everything like that. So I think we still push forward, and I'll speak to like when we were doing the accountability framework. That committee changed members, but the work between the 2 terms continued. We just changed the name a little bit, and kept a couple of members, and a couple other members were added on. Dr. Reed was added on the second term around. So I think you continue to pursue it is what I'm saying. And then as it's constituted, whatever name it is, we continue to work.
I think we at least work on refining the questions, you and Darren. It's probably better to do it without a community member. That way you come in and you're just kind of like, this is what we have kind of done, I mean, sometimes that slows the process down too, of like, we got new people and they gotta figure out what the issue is. So at least maybe use like these next 2 weeks of like, okay, work with them to see like what are the questions that we actually can't answer. And that way the new folks can come on board and you're still progressing towards it, but you have at least the question piece out of the way.
But I do think the work continues. It's not gonna stop.
Yeah, happy to. I just want to run that by the whole board.
And probably the good news is that the 2 of us that are leaving, there are only 2 other people coming on. So there'll still be 7 people on board this time. We've had much bigger changes than that, like 5 changes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And with that, if there's no more questions or anything, members, are there any external committee updates or reports? Shout now. Not seeing Representative Henderson.
Yeah, just an update from the research collaborative, actually, members might be interested to know that Josephine Robinson is stepping down from her role as executive director. And she will, let's see, she's Dara Shaw, who has been the research director, is gonna be the executive director. I'll also just say, I'm excited for the board to develop a relationship with them. To see what can come of it, it's future beneficial for. And see the education also.
Thank you so much, sir. Are there any questions for Representative Henderson on the external committee?
Speaking of research, whatever, any unrelated research you had going on?
So the big thing, which I think I mentioned last, either the last meeting was, they're working on DC alumni outcomes. So they have they got 3 or 4 year long grant to study that.
Cool. Thank you so much for your report. I'm going to turn to Madam President. Seeing your hands up to report.
I have two things to note. First, NASB, I sit on the NASB Public Education Positions Committee. The PEP is normally, how do I put it? PEP normally takes a hiatus after the NASB conference. And so, but one of the things that is on the table is reconstituting PEP in a different, I don't know what to call it. Some reconstitution of PEP that does a better job of being responsive to items that state boards across the country are facing at the time, and like being more timely. I will forward an email to see if folks like have opinions on what that could look like, or try to chime in. That they haven't made any decisions, but that'll be a ongoing, I guess, conversation to try to just be more responsive to supporting state boards' needs as they might have like research requests or develop policy. And so no decisions, but would love folks' input to see how NASB can be more helpful. Second thing to flag, I sit on the community schools advisory group. That group got off to I would say, late start, given the questions around funding for community schools this last budget cycle. And so the majority of our meeting time has been dedicated to talking about how to preserve and protect funding for community schools. We are entertaining the idea of doing a council advocacy day in the spring. And likely will be the committee itself will set up a meeting with the deputy mayor's office to talk about the importance of that as a funding stream before the year is out. I don't have dates for either of those things yet, but wanted to flag it as an activity for members in case folks have interest in supporting community schools work, or interest in that as a funding stream. But we'll definitely share out the dates for those things as they are finalized, so that folks can participate on the board if they would like.
Thank you, Madam President. Are there any questions? All right, any other external committee reports to be given? All right. Thank you, members. We'll now turn to working groups. As a reminder to the viewing public, state board working groups are not the same as committees. Okay? Working groups are time bound and consist of 3 to 4 members, or more than 4 members, elected members who will work in collaboration with state board staff on a specific goal or topic area. For example, the bylaw for working groups was established for the purpose of updating the state board's bylaws and standards operating procedures. Working group meetings are closed to the public, but updates are consistently shared during our monthly working sessions. I say that because there are people who sometimes look for things for that, and they're shared in different ways in committee meetings. At the November public meeting, the State Board Authority Working Group was established with a starting date of December 1st. Are there any updates from that working group?
Yes.
Madam Director.
So, Darren and I will be the staff members working with that working group. As you already recall, the working group will consist of President Thompson, Representative Henderson, and Representative Elect. And an initial email has been sent to those members to identify and state. The goal is to have bi-weekly, every other week meetings, to hash out the body of work and all the next steps for, the state board of governance work. So that they can have something prepared by the end of the sunset date of the resolution. That is all we have.
Okay. Are there any questions regarding this new working group that was just established a few days ago? Constituted for a while. Any questions at all?
Yeah, the question.
Go ahead.
I don't think like working group is in our.
Would you be?
I think task force is the word in the bylaws, so maybe we could just. Probably check.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that person.
Just a little bit.
My question is about the naming of, the group being a working group, because I don't think working group is a category identified in our bylaws. Task forces, committee is. But as far as I know, working group is not. But I'm happy to be corrected on that.
I'm going to be honest in saying I do not have the bylaw vocabulary memorized. I think we took whatever language was in the resolution to name this. And so if there is a better fit or if we need to address that, we should. But I don't want to speak out of turn. But I believe we're using whatever the language is in the state word of the wordy resolution.
I guess my question is related to if we're saying that a working group doesn't fall under.
As I said before, it's not a committee.
Yeah. So where does that come? Where is that distinction?
To get that distinction was in a set of bylaws that we had. I'm sorry, I'm trying to look it up.
It's,
That for a second.
it's in there.
What would be wrong with, forming a committee on civil rights? Because we got a lot of work to do to get anything, I don't think we're ready for resolution by any stretch of the imagination.
We'll get to that particular one in just a second. Our representative O'Leary. I want to make sure that we first talk about what is the proper term and some of the operations as far as working group, task force, those particular aspects of it. So I want to make sure we answer that first.
It's in the SOP.
Okay.
And it says under internal and external committee appointment process.
Yeah,
All right.
it's in there. It's it says in the instance there's a newly added committee / working group. After this process has taken place, the state board president will request for members to voluntarily be a part of one of these committees / working groups. So it's in the standard operating procedures.
I do want to say, I think there's a big difference in when committees are formed, they're formed at the beginning of the year, the beginning of the term, and usually the president establishes those and work with the members of what their interests are and trying to make sure that people are addressing the issues that may have come from the prior term or in new interests. And I think that's all done in that first, so the first and second meeting after a president is elected, leadership is elected, the next responsibility is to put together committees.
Yes, and I will say this, I think with what we're learning too, is like the current set of bylaws are not invalid. It's like we have an amendment around legislation. So if we need to make a second amendment, I think we just amended to clarify it.
Yeah.
If the board so agrees to, I don't think it's like a hill to die on. I think it's flexible enough for us to decide, oh, we're going to clarify this and this is going to be clarified at that as something for the board to vote on as an amendment. Because if it's not clear to you all, then it's also not clear to the public. And so the goal is for clarity and transparency, and not necessarily like to hide things. I think you all just need to agree on like what you want the terms to be. So if you want working groups to be explicitly different, then you can say that, or if you want them to be the same, then I think you all decide that too.
And I wanted to make sure that we differentiate, for the very fact that, like, the public inquiries, we have an inquiry currently of what's posted, what's not posted, how they constituted, at what time frame, things like that was unclear to them, which is happening right now. To the public, we want to make sure that we do, for transparency reasons, you know, make sure we provide that clarity. I'm gonna go to Madam President, who has her hand raised.
Yeah, I appreciate Representative Henderson's question. I also appreciate Director Butler's framing about the clarity, and I will just be upfront about my understanding and why we had a distinction between committees. I understood committees like board committees to be constituted by members only or limited to members. And when we had like the standing operating procedures and bylaws, we also had staff as part of that constitution. And so if we have different understandings of things, I didn't have it as I would say my understanding was not one of the timing of when it was constituted, because you can technically all of the committees, with the exception of the standing ones, are ad hoc. But I do take Director Butler's point around we can clarify if we are all not on the same page, and appreciate Representative Henderson's question, which even allowed us to talk about where we might have different understandings.
So what was the original?
My question was just to where the working group as a category came from, because it's not in our bylaws.
Got it.
And
It's in our SOPs.
but it is in our SOPs, and like, I was on that committee, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I guess this discrepancy.
Yeah.
You know, but to Representative Patterson's point, having those be consistent, you know, both for our sake and for the public, I think we should flag that for the future to try to bring those in alignment. And then you were saying, Executive Director Butler, that the working group doesn't have the same requirements, and so.
I think that's probably my understanding, that it didn't have the same requirements, so that like we, even in the bylaws, we never reported those. So I know committee meetings are recorded, they're broadcast, but I think some of them are live streamed. But that was my understanding, so that was my.
So I'd like
different.
clarity on that as well.
Yeah.
Along those.
And then coming back to your original question, Vice President Harrison, because we need to figure out the wording, but what was the original question around this section?
The question about that section, was basically just a little different, how are they constituted? The question now.
Oh, okay, all right.
This is a working session. How would you all like to work on? I mean, not that we have to make a decision today, but is it a decision like, oh, we need to, want the staff to draft the chair, just like what is the decision to clarify this?
I think since the bylaws rewrite and the SOPs are going to be able to see, just sharing that with the board and then the new members too, who may have ideas that they want to make. You know, giving them an opportunity to share those even before maybe people on board. So if we want to do quickly with this year, get it done right away. And then this could be one of the things that the staff works out. I mean, I'm really just concerned about what we call it. I think it's good that we have an issue that can cross over, you know, various board cycles, and we can wrap it up on a very distinct matter. We need a committee for that, which I kind of view as, you know, a collection of work over a 2-year period. So I think this is the right way to deal with this. I think we can all engage in that process. I look at how we maybe make tweaks to the bylaws to address, you know, terminology, make sure that's consistent, right? So I think it's we move ahead with this right now and then just clean anything up in the bylaws.
I will say all of the incoming members will get a copy of the current state on December 17th, in the board education, that could be one of the instructions that we share, if the members wish to be so.
But I just appreciate the conversation because as we've seen, that the public does not understand how that happens. And the most important thing for me as a representative is that the public always understand what we're doing, that we're transparent with the public. If they have questions that's unclear to them, and then, I appreciate, Representative Henderson bringing this up for the simple fact that it's unclear to some of us. So we want to clarify that and do that work. Thank you.
I'm guessing the distinction will be between the work, well, two things to say. One, I guess, define like when would you send, what would be the purpose of the work group, what would be the purpose of the task force, like what will be the outcome of when things get workforce versus work group versus task force, I guess. Because it's like this work group is to do some like preliminary fact finding information. I would say the process that gave me pause was in something that, just kind of like observing over like the last year or so of like, what is the role of outside entities being able to submit information? And then how do we, like that DLA paper clearly had a stance, but then how do we balance, that with, okay, like this was the DLA stance. How do you balance it with other perspectives so that whatever the working group, whatever that entity is, make sure they have a balanced approach for whatever the final product is? Because DLA looked like it was going really hard on education should be a civil right, but we didn't have any balancing research. Like usually our staff does, pretty, without any influence. Because again, kind of in my career, like that would be considered a gift to the government. That would not be appropriate. And so I don't feel like, making sure we don't have any outside influences that are, we're gonna give you this pro bono, legal document, which I'm sure a lawyer to procure that length of document is gonna be a lot of money. Saying like, this is something that you see needs. So I think that's the greater issue for me of, when is it appropriate for individuals to, get those kind of things? How do we balance out that information? What is the working group's role in processing that information so that the public can make a fair assessment of what's happening? Because what happened was it just felt like there was some transaction that appeared like it wasn't, above board, but it sounds like how our working groups are constituted, that you can just basically do a lot of like research if you want to. So you also might want to consider if that's even appropriate, so I just wanted to put that out there. I know it seems like we're talking about working for task force, but I think the deeper issue is we literally got a legal document from a law firm in California that would have been expensive to procure as a agency.
And from the agency did not get a document.
Okay.
The State Board of Education never received a document. So I should be
that out loud, yes.
So as the executive director, as a place that has our own attorney, like,
Yeah.
that has not happened.
And that didn't.
And so I think that that's not clear for a lot of folks. But I do get your point about the outcome, because even with the bylaws working group, like, we were working with NASP, we were getting like examples from other states to do our bylaws. So I do think maybe research is one of the tenets in there, because we did do that as a part of the bylaws working group also. So I think that's like helpful to understand. And is it if that comes out, the outcome is the expectation that we get more administrative, non-resolution things out of work groups? Or is it that we get research, or maybe it's research and non-binding, rather like, again, the bylaws was a document that you also had to vote on as a board, but that was an administrative vote and not a resolution. So.
And I truly appreciate that. I'll come right back to you. I appreciate that, Dr. Reed, for the simple fact that appearance becomes reality, even if that's not the way that it came in. It seems as if that particular document was procured by a government agency. No one knew how that came about unless you were part of the working group. So how something is introduced even to the working group are disseminated to the larger community. Because even in trying to be transparent and share it with members, because I'm going to take ownership of that I received that from people that I met at Harvard, basically. And so, and how you introduce that needs to be very clear, needs to be transparent so that it does not have any negative impact on how we're dealing with different agencies, law firms, or whatever they may be, that could be taken, as you said, a gift to the government. And it never came, it was never a request, which I tried to state, and I answered with email by the government. It was
Yeah.
never anything that came from the government. It was something that I did in research and then introduced it to.
So I'm
the
thinking like
argument.
in the definition, like whatever information you collect, like working group could be literally like, this is the issue that the state board doesn't know, it wants to actually just want to do further research and be able to research in a, a manner. And then maybe task force is literally the state board has said that we want to pick up this issue, and we want to do something about it.
Right.
And that's the task oriented, so that might be, I don't know. if that
And those
makes
are things that we can kind of vet a little bit more out, because as we've seen that we did some work on it with our SOPs, but it is something that because there was confusion in this particular working group and stuff like that, there's some work that needs to be done. Especially even as we're about to enter into the work, of the new work group, or however we call it, that
Thanks.
we're about to enter. Representative Henderson, you have something?
My question was, what our timeline is on the work to add the legislative process.
So
It makes sense to.
maybe we'll get it all at once, like.
Well, I was thinking the same, actually.
Yeah, and so, Jen's gonna do a whole presentation on that, but the timeline for that was to prepare like amendment one or A for both December. Again, there's no reason why we can't hold them, so that we can do them all at once. Because you all have already provided feedback, thank you all who did go into that and provide feedback, and so we made those changes and adjustments. But it's an amendment that could also easily be done and submitted in January alongside others.
I also don't want to hold up. The legislative work we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any legislative work between now and January. So,
Just to second your point on that, I would go rather than try to vote on the legislative policy separate in the state. It's just put it in the bylaws or the SOPs and where it fits best. Let the new members also have feedback on it. And then we just vote it there. There's no legislation pending, and it would lapse anyway with the council period. So it just makes sense to, have a good discussion here today and then put it in what we do before we think we have January.
Right, I think we have exhausted, questions and comments, regarding that particular working group. Next, we'll share updates from the Education and Civil Rights Working Group, which was established in May of 2024 and extended through November, sunset this past November. So that you know that has sunset. I want to say that for the public. As a member of it, I'm going to provide some of the context. You do have in your material now, and I believe it is up and stuff for your public. Is that correct?
Correct.
This also report the summary, so to speak. So I'm going to stick to script that Jen has put together because she was our wonderful staffer on this, along with Kathleen, and stick to script. So you have the meeting dates actually on here of when we actually met. You have the members that were part of this particular working group. Okay. And you have basically some of the considerations. I want to state that, upfront, I know it states at the end of the report, there's been no resolution put together. I know people use measures because as a means of the panel last time, but nothing has been put together. Nothing has been put on paper at this particular point. We as a working group, we're basically trying to research what this looks like in other states. Past efforts in the District of Columbia on it. We were trying to dig out and if this should be something that we could present that would provide more accountability. And what you see is some of the discussions and considerations that we also looked at Arkansas, we looked at California, which is one of the most recent and still are going back to do it. Even though it didn't make the ballot last time, they are still trying to work on that initiative. And then you have some, in this report, you have some links to some other information which the staff also provided. I don't believe this was a one-sided effort, that even though there was a memo that was presented that I actually presented because I asked some people to look into the report that people think was produced or requested by the government. It was not. I want to make that very clear for the public. It was something that I was looking at because I knew a member who actually worked with Education Reform Now and asked them, could they give me some information on it? It's as innocent as that. There's no nefarious kind of thing to it, which has kind of come up in different conversations, but that's literally how it happened. And so that's how the DLA Piper aspect came into even being circulated or anything like that. And I wanted to state that for the record. It also says that during our discussion, members, consider what formalized education as a civil rights could look like in Washington DC, including which term, such as my good friend and colleague has stated, high quality, would need to be, and clearly defined. That is stated, we're looking at that. We have not defined it as of yet. But we know that's a word that we have talked about and has been talked about previously, as long ago now, this particular by former chair of the Education Committee, Kathy Patterson. So this is, I've told some people in conversations with them, this is not a new subject. It's new to us because it hasn't been discussed in 18 years, but it's not a new subject as far as defining, quality education, tied into different aspects of what we would desire for our kids. And there is information out there, on even the council's website that speaks to this. When we get to the panel and the resolution and talking about the state resolution and everything like that, I know there's been a lot of discussion, about what our next steps are. I think, it's been clearly stated here, that again, we have not done that. It's not going to be something, I want to state, something that's going to be presented on the 11th or anything like that, a resolution. As I, speak to the staff, there's certain things that have to happen. There's certain engagement. There has to be an equity stage that has to happen. There's so many steps that have to happen before a resolution can be produced that at this particular time, especially since we have holidays and our time is crunched, there is not going to be a resolution that will be presented on the 11th. So I want to make that very clear. Right? There is time for input. There is time to discuss it. There's time for people to add to the conversation that we have. The working group merely talked about what it would look like to raise the issue or to push for education as a civil right. That was what we did. That's what we talked about. What has been produced is now here in this particular report, and people can view it, including our public, and then we can start to discuss what would a resolution should we hope to have a resolution, because the committee is talking about a resolution. That's one of the recommendations that we want to have. What that would look like. So I'll end there, and we can start the discussions over. Representative who was a member on the working group.
I just wanted to thank you for putting the issue. It's really important discussion and really appreciated the meetings that we had as part of the work on this to discuss it and get it to this point. So I think it was really useful. I support doing a resolution on this. I think you're really wise to, make sure we give ourselves time, get a new membership on board. We work on it as Representative O'Leary said, that definition, and then we continue to engage the community. So I think the process you've laid out makes so much sense to me. I think with the support, what we come up with on it. And, I like, there was a lot of discussion there, I think, about concerns about a bill or something, but we've made it clear on the board that we don't have to do a bill at the same time we do a resolution. So we have the potential for, doing a resolution and then kind of getting the lay of the land with where, not only the White House is, but then also the Congress and seeing, if that's something that makes sense or if it makes sense to wait. So I think I fully support, your effort on this. I think the leadership's been great on it. We've got to define what high quality education is and then set the deliverables. You talked about accountability throughout this process. And I think that's something that was sorely needed in the discussion. So I'm excited to work with you on it. I think it's going to be a great discussion to have for 25, and I can't wait to get a resolution together with you on this, because I think it's something that's going to really bring accountability to the board. So just want to thank you and commend the work of the committee, and look forward to continuing that work in the new year.
And I appreciate that, and I see hands that are up. But I do want to make sure that everybody knows that this is an ongoing conversation, and that we want to hear your voice, and that the sole purpose, and I'm actually happy with some of the conversations that have come out of this, whether they're in support or not in support, or kind of saying, okay, we have to look at what this means for us as a state. All that is being taken into consideration. That's not like someone's pushing something and we just are not considering all of the dynamics that we're about to enter into, or is our situation as a place that's not a state. So I do see the hand of both Alistair, and since he was a member, and then I'm gonna go to Brandon after Alistair, because they're both members, and I want to make sure.
Thank you.
Go right
Thank
ahead.
you. My question is a simple one, which I'd love to hear your take and recommendations for what happens next.
Okay, so for me, what I would hope that comes out of this recommendation from the work group is that we do go forward and with a resolution, and what that, and start crafting language for that, and consideration of everyone that is here and the input that we've had, what that looks like, if there's some things that need to happen, and that some definitions need to happen. But I would like to put forth that we do a resolution. We'll have to talk about when that resolution is presented. And we know it's not going to be presented in this month. But we do want to put a resolution forward. So that's the next step that we're talking about. Beyond that, Representative Chang, I don't have a goal. I say that it would be nice to have legislation, but this group, this body has to say if that's something that they want to pursue or not. That's regardless of me as a person, what this group wants to do. So I'll leave it there. I'll Representative Chang, and hopefully that answers your question, and I'll go to Representative Best.
Thank you.
President.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Patterson. I believe that promoting education as a civil rights it's a powerful idea. It underscores the importance of ensuring equitable access to a quality education for all students. It's a conversation that we need to have. However, there are, serious implications that we need to consider. We have to wonder if the spirit of the work will ultimately cause more harm in its implementation. But I think that could be handled in our language. And so I think it's possible. I don't want us to open up things that could hurt us in the long run, but I think that if we are very thoughtful in our implementation and how we go about this, I think that we can. I do want to say though, I want to ensure what's done with one sector is also done with the other. So if we are, working on making this with DCPS with charters also, but I do think that I love the spirit of it. I love the the conversation that's coming from it, and look forward to working on this with you as we move on.
Thank you so much, Representative Best. Madam President.
Yes, I mentioned during the panel debrief, I think what Representative O'Leary asked or raised about what is a high quality education is important, and is a big conversation. I am curious as far as thoughts around the order of operations for having that conversation and proposing a resolution. I would like to see us have engagement and work around that before we put that language in a resolution, because I would imagine that language would be part of the resolution, not to know and be able to speak to what we consider that to be. I also think it is the thing for me that, and I would be curious to hear some feedback around this. As I understand the why, that seems to be a big part of the why. I also just have questions about the how and the what. And so what are the steps? I guess, so here's the how. The how is like the order of operations for the conversation around high quality. What other inputs or steps need to be taken to get to a resolution? Like, what are those activities? Are we hearing from more folks at a public meeting? Are you all inviting more perspectives as a working group, or whatever language we should be using right now? Like, what does it look like to round out what goes into the resolution and deal with the language as Representative Best raised? Like, that how is important to me. And then I do want to have a shared expectation around the what we are delivering. And so is it that we are having a conversation about putting a resolution forward and that is it? Or is it a resolution with us being with the expectation that there be legislation later? Like I kind of want to have a stronger sense of not the why, but the how and the what, so we can govern ourselves accordingly moving forward.
I'm trying to answer the question as possibly can, other members, and hold that. Before I do,
No,
you have
I'm
something
just,
right
I'm
there?
asking.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, okay, so about the actual content, ditto to everything that folks said about, defining high quality education. And I'm still curious with the factors of that panel, like how does that balance with our accountability framework, where we literally said these are the measures that we are doing some measure of quality and then we're rating them to say, so I would be nervous to put something contradictory to the accountability framework, or just want more clarity on like how do you balance out that work? Because we often say like, oh, like, well, I'll pick on DCS, oh, they just got a new math curriculum and then now they're training teachers on a whole new one in 2 years. And it's like, well, they never had a chance to stick and we see, you know, the work or if it was, you know, effective or not. Same thing for our framework. We literally just voted it in, our accountability framework, just voted in about what, a year ago? And now we're saying we want to look at, you and I know we also did another resolution about like the cadence for the quality framework or the accountability framework, but I'm just curious, like, how does that work balance? And then, yeah, ditto about another thing that gave me pause was the appearance that it was just towards one system. And I think if, you know, the right should be in regards to, you know, any of our publicly funded systems, so. I just want to say that, really, step out there.
And I'll try to answer this question going in way that I can remember it too. Okay, go right ahead. Go ahead.
Wait if you want to.
I'm trying to write it down, and, you know, and be able to try to answer the questions of everybody that have questions.
So a couple of things, some for my own clarity, and I mentioned this when talking about the panel. Like, I now understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, the panelists, when they were talking about the measure, or like what the thing was, they were talking about the language that's in the Piper memo. And so we should take all that they said being in reference to that. And so I also have questions about, is that something that the authors of the memo, created as like, here's the language we propose that would do this. And then their subsequent analysis is in relation to that language. And it was in the memo and that analysis that I think drew out this problem of that, well, that language would only affect DCPS. And it even, the memo even refers to, you know, this measure would only do DCPS. Another measure could address charter schools. And so I think I'm in agreement with what others have said about like at minimum, anything we propose would need to apply to both sectors. And then for me, the other big question is around remedies, and the measure that we've talked about already did have that limit to equitable relief. And then what I would want in addition to that is just to, as much as possible, confine the remedy to improving the system, and the system's ability to provide high quality education, which we do need to still define. And then the kind of practical question is who in the board is going to continue doing this work now that the working group is done? Do you see this as, do we need to start an ad hoc committee, or do we need to refer this to a committee, an existing committee, or what what is the vehicle for moving this through all those steps to a resolution?
I appreciate all of us. I'll try to, and I welcome other members to chime in that was part of the working group. And I try to write as many notes as possible to answer the question. I'll start with you, since they're the most current version of the consent. As far as the language, it was just that from the memo. I know that it's called a memo. It was proposed. That does not necessarily have to be the language that we would put in a resolution when we do a resolution. It's a proposal. It was their suggestion and their opinion. And I think you are very correct, and I appreciate it in saying that, this came from this particular group, and it does not have any bearing in the sense of what we do, in the sense of other than this is our thoughts on it. That's basically it, and no different than any other group or people who testified in person and gave us their thoughts in person or in testimony. All of this will be taken into consideration. I believe, coming out of this work, when you ask about how, we do continue to work within, if a resolution is to be done. We do have to answer the questions from Representative Thompson about how that happens and everything like that. But when you ask what's the how, there's a lot of questions that we have to answer for Representative Thompson that gets us to that particular resolution. There's a lot of questions that are still done. And I think we continue to work with Jen about how that happens in that process. I think that's basically all we can do is make a recommendation, and then as a group, we decide on how that happens as a group.
We the board or we the working group?
Well, the work group is we the board. So now we're talking about the members of every elected official, okay? That's here, and including our students. Okay, right. I want to go to Abby Rose real quickly because she did real quick, and then I'll come right back to you. Okay.
So my individual opinion is that there is probably still work for the working group to do. Because we don't have I don't feel like we have a recommendation to respond to from the working group. I feel like what folks have responded to is a memo that was circulated that was not a board product. And I would love to know from the working group what their recommendation is as far as what's included in any as far as any next steps. Like I think the working group should kind of work through the questions that are asked. And there's always the opportunity to extend the working group. And then I would love for the working group to vote something out of it for the larger board to consider. The opportunity here is to be able again to answer the questions the members have proposed, and the members of the working group will continue to be on the board through this next constitution of the board. And so I don't know if that's something the members would be amenable to, or if there's a suggested timeline for like some of those actions. But personally, I would love, given the thought that's gone into it and the passion from some of the members who are part of the working group, for them to document and detail that so that we have marching orders and come to some, it doesn't have to be consensus, but some type of at least agreement with several of those members before going to the larger board. But that would, I don't know how others feel about that.
But I would say, in trying to respond to you, Madam President, I think it's a great idea. I know that process matters just as much as transparency matters. Whenever you're proposing something of this nature, I would entertain, I cannot speak to the other members that constituted the board that was actually at sunset. I would accept an extension, for a time that this group sets, to extend again, the working group so that we could bring what you have just stated very eloquently, something recommended that the whole group could kind of speak to. And it's not as convoluted or confusing as currently where the state we're in. So I would and would would do that, but I can't speak for all of my members, at this particular time. But I do welcome that, and I think that's a great, suggestion. Yes, sir. Mr. Fraser O'Leary, Representative, Doctor.
This is an old joke, but a sort of a metaphor. Building a plane while you are flying. It sounds to me like that's what we're doing. And now I want to talk to the student members. Because in order for any of their papers when they're in their English class to work, they have to have a provable thesis. And what we need for this project is a provable thesis. We need to decide on what it is, and then how are we going to achieve it? And this thing about State Board of Education making a law or something like that, probably needs to go in the trash something. But I just think that, as you said, there needs to be time spent on setting up a framework and finding information that will allow you to write a resolution that makes sense and that is achievable. That's it.
And I will say, I appreciate that, and I agree with it as well.
I appreciate your school metaphor because I'm writing a paper right now where that is the case. But I will also say that I continue with the metaphor. I think that, of course, having intention and like knowing what the direction is really important. But it is also okay to start writing if you have like an outline, like I feel like we don't need a thorough, fully fleshed out idea of what the intention is, as long as we know, as long as we have a sense of what our goals are and what we're trying to do. And I think that, like in many cases, having the desire to have a fully fleshed out idea gets in the way of actually doing things. And I think this might be a case where actually doing things would be productive, but I'm not saying that means rush it. But I think that it is, like, obviously we need to have more conversations about it. But I just wanted to say that.
I'm going to, I believe Representative Boulay had an answer. I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Well, let me offer an extended, and I definitely welcome that. I think it was a really valuable discussion we had over the meetings we had. If the goal of the president and the board is that we get back together and draft the resolution to present to the board, I certainly welcome that. I think it was something that was worthwhile. I mean, from my perspective on what was presented at the board meeting, it kind of just reminds me a lot of how legislation usually comes before the council. I mean, in this case, it's a resolution from the board, but you'll have the groups come in and speak on the topic. And they'll present the idea of the bill to the council with details that we'd like to see in the bill. So I think there may have been some confusion about this, but to me, it's just very typical of what you see all the time, where you have a group who's interested in a particular topic or matter coming forward with, the start of a solution to it. So I appreciated the memo. I thought it was really helpful to get the conversation going, and it's something that we see, regularly, and I think, in other work that we see in the city. And I'd just like to build upon what Representative O'Leary said and President Thompson about this. For me, I think what we're doing is trying to set the bar with high quality. Everybody believes we need high quality education. That should be a civil right here in the city. And so we've just got to define that. Once we can define it, if I look across the city, getting a variety of voices, looking across the country, seeing what other states may measure this as, then we can try to do what we need to do as a city to get there. And I think that's a useful conversation to have. And that's really accountability you sought. So I welcome it. I would volunteer to continue that work if that's what you'd like and what the board would like. So I'm all in on that discussion.
I'll field your question now, Representative.
My suggestion, given that we're kind of not real clear on working group, would be to use an ad hoc committee so that it would be, subject to the open meetings and stuff. And so that would eliminate, the question moving forward about and just make it clear. You know, even if it's the same composition of people, just to be clear, like, it's an ad hoc
So,
committee.
so what you're suggesting, to be clear, what you're suggesting is not the extension, another extension date of the week, quote, working group,
Yeah,
but to actually constitute an ad hoc for this particular, subject matter.
yeah, I mean, I think it's too late to just merely extend the working group anyway, so we'd have to reconstitute whatever body it was, and which my preference would be
Very
to make it.
That is, I mean, because technically the resolution says that it is sunset November 30th. Has to, you have to do another, so you got, whatever the bid is you want to do, you have to do another, bid anyway, or it has to go.
And it's really no different whether you're extending it or constituting it, it's a whole
It's a
resolution.
whole resolution.
But, I mean, it's President Thompson's discretion, but my suggestion would be to go ahead and just make it a committee so that it's.
I mean, I'm open to that. I don't, yeah, I'm open to that. I mean, I will be honest and say I made the assumption, that when, the meetings were happening, they were being recorded and there were minutes and all the things. And so let's not assume. I'm open to making it an ad hoc committee. I have no objections, to that, especially since, we have passed the sunset date. And so, I'm happy, to, recommend, that we constitute this as an ad hoc committee, to allow all the things that Representative Henderson outlined.
I'm open to that as well, and then, so any recommendations that the committee had, I mean, the working group had, we will roll them over to an ad hoc, group where we'll continue to work on what those recommendations will be, but those recommendations will probably come back.
Well, so I think it's a couple of things. I want to make sure that like, if there's a specific question that people have, and there's a specific perspective from Representative Boulay and Representative Henderson, you know, Representative Patterson. So I think there's gonna be a constitutional something, ad hoc committee is fine. But I think what would be helpful for the resolution to be constituted is to be clear on what some of the questions are that will be answered, or at least looked at, explored, so that there is greater. Because a resolution doesn't have to come out of the ad hoc. There could be another set of recommendations with this body of work. So I don't want to think just because it's a committee, now you have to come up with a resolution. That is not the case. And then, so I don't want to like say, therefore, let it be that this ad hoc committee will produce a resolution by this date. That is not necessarily, so the product doesn't have to be the resolution. But whatever you all recommend is go out of the committee to the board, whether it is a resolution, whether it's a set of recommendations to be shared, whether it is a letter to the council, I have no idea, but whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a resolution, but that you all are able to answer all of the questions that other members have raised as you continue to explore this topic. And because it is a committee, it'll be live streamed, it'll be recorded, then there'll be also report out as a part of our normal session. And so ad hoc means also not time bound. So it adds less of a constraint that you have to be done in like 30 days.
So I think my recommendation is not, and I'm not, saying that we should put in the resolution what the deliverable will be. I'm saying that we should take, the things that it sounds like we know the why. It sounds like we know some of the questions, that folks would like answered, and set them as parameters and say, we are establishing a committee, to explore these purposes, and those should be the therefore. I don't think we have to, dictate, a deliverable. I think it's more so that we at least now have a greater share understanding, of what these discussions, should, entail on Earth. My additional comment would be, we do not have a resolution, written for this evening, regarding, the of, this committee. And so I'm curious how members, see the timeline of, constituting this committee. If this is something that we would want to write and then include on the agenda with a 2/3 vote, or if we would be looking to move this resolution in January. Because there's some work to be done. Because we don't have this before us tonight. It's not written.
There's an old Southern saying about stick a pin in it. It seems to me, from what I'm hearing from everybody, that there isn't a whole lot of work going to be done between now and New Year's Day. So I think we should just stick a pin in it. And that the new board will inherit all of the knowledge that we've heard in this meeting tonight. Now, obviously, I'm speaking off the record or whatever, but it just doesn't seem, it seems to me like we're spinning our wheels right now, because there's not gonna be anything done between now and the end of the year. But you got the wheels and the wings on the ground. It's just.
Always appreciate those metaphors. Were there other comments?
Just, I'll wrap this up. Because
Right.
I mean, I don't know that we go through. I mean, this is one discrete resolution. I don't know that we move that out. For me, the purpose of setting a working group is to have a discussion on the matter. And I feel like there's going to be a public process to do this as a resolution. I feel like if you explored it, if we got that panel, and if Representative Patterson wants to bring this up next session, you know, all the members who are part of the working group can certainly collaborate with him on the resolution. That's an informal process that we do. You know, for any resolution, we seek out collaboration with our colleagues. I don't know that, I think we're overly formalizing this. I think there could be a thing where we just talk, we discuss this. Representative Patterson then, you know, can introduce a resolution with feedback from members of the committee, the formal working group. And then it goes through the public process. It goes through, which you should anyway, it goes through a public process here with the working session, and then it's going to be voted on by the board, and people have an opportunity to see it and testify on it. So I think we are making this a little bit more complex than it needs to be. I don't know that we can get over to that level of depth with it. I think it was a valuable discussion we had, and now, you know, we can continue that discussion like we would any other resolution. But, you know, if it's the will of the body to do a committee or a working group on this, I'll certainly participate, but I would also participate with Representative Patterson, you know, if he's putting a resolution together. So I just don't think we want to do this for every issue, for every issue. I think we're making this too complex. Just my thoughts.
I appreciate those. I want to make sure that we can respond to those. We have two of our student representatives. You guys can take respond to those first.
I guess I'll go first. I do understand what you're saying, Representative Boulay, but I also think that this is one of the more complex issues that we as a board will ever have to address. And I think that it ties a lot into inequalities and other systemic issues that are incredibly complicated and no number of committees would be able to address. And I think that of the things that should be deeply unpacked and should be very deeply considered, this is absolutely one of them. I am not informed enough right now to like fully endorse a committee, but I do think that, like, I stand by that of any issue that deserves one, it probably is this one. And I think that if it came to like creating a committee for it, I would support that. Yeah, generally think that.
Yeah, so I definitely would go back to positive from the committee behind it. Because especially where I'm, you know, representing coming from where they specifically, the schools we have there, oftentimes you see they don't give the quality education that we need. They're not provided the resources, they're not provided the funds, they're not provided, you know, much more we need in order to survive in this type of environment we're living in, especially with, drastic changes that we see, it's very important that we're now, this is something that we're more exposed to. And so what I also want to say is that as we're considering this, let us look at, because that high quality piece is very, tricky for me. But let us look at making a distinction between those who are high quality versus those who aren't. I believe we aren't putting enough emphasis on what type of schools look like non-high quality schools. What type of schools are we thinking of that may look like schools that aren't really getting, the education they need? And when I also think of that, I'm also thinking of not simply education itself, but what else makes a school not high quality education? Well, the outside of it, when you go there, you see the outside, how look, you may not want to go there. If you look at many of, the people who put their children, parents who put their children in school, they think of a high quality education and they think of, oh, is it a safe school? Is it, it's very much deeper simply than education itself, and the material that's being taught is also, the simple environment of the school is there. So I believe this is definitely a deep topic, that is definitely really for me. And it should, I endorse the committee.
Try to wrap this up with rapid fire.
Sorry, just to respond to what Representative Boulay said, I think it is a weighty enough issue that it does deserve a longer public process, and because it didn't go through committee, went through, which is different. So I think it should go through that and be part of a larger conversation about accountability and why. I think what we aren't saying is that we know that a lot of our schools are not delivering high quality education. So what are all the things that we need to do?
And I'll try to conclude now. Were there any other comments?
Or my last comment was to bring it back to the metaphor that Representative O'Leary started with the school paper. Plagiarism isn't allowed in the academic environment, but it's certainly allowed in writing legislation. I think that it would be something that the committee. I think the committee has, if the committee gets bored, part of my course language, we could always look at how such like rights are implemented, not just in other states, but in the specific counties and areas that are most like DC. For example, areas where like if a school district has a like in DC we have Ward 7 and 8, and there's a imbalance of transportation access. Maybe some counties and some states will have that, and looking really in depth and looking at all these different school districts and how they deal with education as a civil right could be a way to use a committee if we create one. That is a lot of work though, so God bless whoever has to do that.
Thank you, sir. What I'll say is, so we can get to a break, I think that everybody is waiting for, yes, we do have a break that follows this. What I will say is, first and foremost, I appreciate all the dialogue that has gone into this and the feelings. This is exactly, when I first thought about this and asked for a working group, the type of dialogue that I wanted to hear and anticipating. I know this is a very, as been said, a weighty issue. That there are very strong feelings, both that are in this room and people who are connected to individuals that are in this room that have weighed in on this particular subject matter. I also agree with what Representative Boulay has said. This has received the type of attention that a lot of our resolutions don't receive, is what I'll say. We pass them and then we kind of say, okay, let everybody respond to it now, after the fact. And we've had pushback, letters written from other elected officials and signed off on, but we passed the resolution. So with all that being said, I'm open to extending the dialogue in the manner that has been suggested, constituting this, so that we can have an outcome that I hope will end in a resolution. What happens after that resolution is not what I'm trying to decide at this particular time. For those who are kind of look way down the line, so okay, so what does this mean for after the resolution? What I would like to say is that one of the things that we constitute this is that I am looking for a resolution of this. So if people ask, what is the it, or whatever the case is a resolution. We can talk about the wording, we can discuss what goes into that like we do every other, resolution, but that's the goal.
Well, and I don't think you can say that. I think, because you're one member and the working group consists, who consists of multiple members. And so if all the people on the committee, if there isn't a majority vote out of the committee to make a resolution, then, like, and so I think that process still has to play out. So I don't, so that is my biggest concern, but I think ultimately, I can see as an individual, who wants to be on the committee, will be on the committee. But I think that has to be the decision, recommendations, or it cannot be. But I don't want us to hamstring ourselves, like, that is what the purpose of the committee is. I think the purpose of the committee should be to answer the questions, to explore a topic, and then for the committee to decide what it's going to do. And if, that is what the board wants. But I think we do have to be very careful pre-deciding outcomes for the, like, the committee and the work has fully in research been done.
And I appreciate that, Director, and what I will say, because we have had members as individuals come in and recommend resolutions. So I will speak for me, not the group that may be formed, whatever form. My goal as an individual is at some point to present a resolution on the subject. So I will be clear on that aspect. Okay. Any other discussion?
I think in terms of process, the next step, the only person that, the board was allowed to create committee, the president, so if you want the, information, committee members from the president, for a resolution to be given. At this point, based on the discussion, I'm assuming we're shooting for a timeline of January to put this on the public meeting agenda to develop the committee.
Okay.
Is that, but that again, that is up to President Thomas.
That seems ambitious. Because we have to elect the president in January, right?
You do have to elect the president.
But then we have to form our committees, and does that all occur at the same meeting, or how would that?
So committees are not formed at the public meeting. Committees are, like the resolution of the appointment to committees are voted on in the public meeting. There is an email in your inbox that's you all. In the past, we've let this language until like March or April, and I'm trying to avoid that. Particularly with our new members, which is why we're doing orientation before they start, like, well, starting ready to after, is to be able to have a retreat at, in January. No later than February 1st, because that's the last day that's on the form, so that you all can talk through committees. So by the retreat date, the public meeting will be done, and we'll have the president and the vice president.
Yeah, it's continued.
Well, and that's the thing, they can, but, yeah, like there is no sunset day. I don't think that, exact resolution. for
That
the
is
committee.
correct.
Yeah, so like there is no sunset day for me, but like there still will need to be a resolution to appoint new members to those existing committees or reshuffle members around instead of the existing committees. And that can happen as soon as you all would like for them to. So like, for example, the new members will get a complete, like the orientation will include, these are the current committees, these are the issues that these committees have been working on. Like that is part of their new member orientation that they will have in December. So, and they will be at the January working session.
That was what I was saying.
And so like all of
There's a working session before the elections and everything like that, so the current president could actually put those things on the agenda for the.
well, yeah, so anything that has happened between now and then, because the current president is the president elected.
Right, until that.
Yeah,
on the
so-
15th.
So like Ebony will still be the president until the new president is elected. That makes sense.
So it can happen if the current president presents it at the working meeting.
And then it's on the
Right,
agenda,
and
then
it's on
it'll
the
be voted on. Now,
So
whether or
that-
not by the end of the public meeting, if Ebony Rose is to run or not run, is still the president, the resolutions may already be on the
It would
agenda
still be
for a
on,
vote.
it would be part of the business of that day, along with the elections and everything else.
That's helpful.
Yes.
But committee, again, I you all got to
It would still be.
divide yourselves up.
Right.
On the existing committee.
believe we've exhausted even logistics, and thought processes behind this. I'm seeing nothing else at the current time, no raised hands, on screen or anything like that. I'm gonna move that we move to our break. So that we can just take a little while, whatever anyone needs, walk around. So we're 10 minutes, I got a suggestion that has been pretty weighty, that we have a 10 minute instead of a 5 minute break. So we will come back at, I'm not gonna divulge, but I'm going to.
Suggestion 5.
Second.
Okay, you gotta take a vote on a break, is that what we need to do?
Some anonymous person. I mean, we've been rolling, but we go, and we should be able to finish the rest of.
How many people want a 5 minute break? How many people want a 10 minute break? Is a 10 minute break? At 10, at 7.
Hey, it's spirit.
Gotta wait for.
Okay, we're back.
We are now gonna come back from our break. We will now, move on to, from what I see, a new business. I want to ask members if they have any additional items of new business to add to the following list. What we have down here currently is, legislative process updates, recognizing 2024 Blue Ribbon, schools, CR 24-27, calling for a comprehensive induction and mentoring program for new teachers in the District of Columbia. CR 24-28, addressing HVAC issues in DC public schools. CR 24-8, recognizing outgoing Ward 4 representative, Fraser O'Leary, and CR 24-9, recognizing my representative, outgoing representative from Ward 8, Dr. Carlin Reed. Is there any other things that we want to add?
There was the SOB discussion around admin, regarding the invitation, question from the mayor. This I'm just recalling, Emily Rose has something, it's her thing.
Madam President?
I have one clarifying question and then items. The air quality, there were two in there. All of them said CR, but the other ones are SRs, right? The air quality one is a SR and the mentoring and induction to be a SR, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then as far as additional items, I would like to add the conversation I spoke to in the leadership report around changes in the administration and what that means for DC education. Just brief thoughts on if that's a conversation we want to have and what voices we might want to invite to that conversation. I would also like to propose 2 CRs, one for Josephine Bias Robinson as the outgoing research practice partnership director, and one for outgoing Councilmember Vincent Gray of Ward 7, but both of those would be CRs.
Okay. Hope someone's, did I miss the first name, Madam President, that you did before Vincent Gray?
Josephine Bias Robinson. She's the outgoing director of the research practice partnership.
All right, so I would ask the question, what we just discussed as far as the right, that's well, be at the lead of that.
The discussion the long discussion we just had, we need to discuss it again.
No, not again, but I think we said we talked about an act something.
Oh, the timing of that now isn't that's in the president's order.
Just wanted to be clear. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. So we have 3 additions. So we'll speak to them now. The legislative process update.
Yes, so I do have some slides that are updates based on the feedback that you all gave last working session. And I would like to share those briefly, and then we have one point of discussion for this legislative process, and then I'll review the next steps. Perfect, thank you, Director Butler. So a lot of your suggestions were just clarifying the language. So I put in red what I have changed to make more clear. In the first part, pre-drafting process, there must be a separate state resolution calling for legislative action in addition to any proposed state board legislation. So that was the biggest change there in that first process. If we go to the next slide, which is the drafting and vote. There were more suggestions for this one. So all bills must follow the internal state board legislative template, which will be in development. The state resolution and legislation may each be voted on at the same public meeting during the administrative vote section. However, this was a suggestion I received. This is not a requirement. For example, if the state board members want to vote on the resolution first and have further discussion on the draft legislation, then the legislation can be considered and voted on the following month. That was the suggestion you all gave, and that update has been made. This next slide contains the point that had some member concern last month. I have seen a couple comments in the SharePoint document since I shared it though, which I will mention. It says members will vote. I think I'm going to change this to say members will vote at the public meeting to approve transmission to council. And the legislation must receive a 2/3 majority vote to be approved. If it does not receive a 2/3 majority vote, it will not be transmitted. And as a reminder, this was essentially to ensure that any legislation from the state board has, more weight, and we're considering the staff time as well. Representative Goulet added a comment in the SharePoint document, and you said that initially you expressed concern, but you thought about it more. And you are now okay with the 2/3 majority. And so that's that was the only comment I received so far on this point, but because members had brought up concerns about it last time, I wanted to highlight it here and see what, if you all have thought more about it, whether you would like to change it and open that up for discussion.
I have a question. And as I look at the 2/3, is that 2/3 presence or the whole body? Because that can be very different in the sense of voting or support of, because it depends on who's there at that particular current time or vote, as opposed to 9 members.
Yeah.
Because one way is you need 6.
Right.
The other way is who's ever there at that particular meeting, it has to be 2/3 of that group that's there.
Well, I think there's not, if you want to vote on what's like what you want. So if you want 2/3 of the board, then I think you should carry that. But I think that's really up to you all to decide. And I don't think it's that kind of pressure.
Yeah, and I will say, at the last public meeting, you all had to do the 2/3 majority vote in order to add a new SR to the agenda. And that was 2/3 of the body,
That was
of the elected body. So you needed 6 out of 9.
Okay.
And so that's what I was working from for this.
Okay.
But open to feedback again, because this is your process.
I want to thank you for raising that point, since something I hadn't thought about, and I think we should do 2/3 present or even not 2/3. We could have an instance where we have 1 or 2 vacancies that occur for whatever reason. Let's say somebody gets a job, or they leave the city, and then we would effectively be blocked from moving any legislation. It was like, or one member would basically have a veto power. So I think 2/3 of the body who's present should be enough. I mean, that would usually be 5, unless you were already 6 or less members, which would be pretty rare. So I think that's still, I think, a strong statement. We don't want to just transmit bills with a majority. I think that was very close. I would like to change this language up here from members will vote yes or no.
Yeah.
I think we want to also give members the ability to vote present or abstain. Just those are typically things you can do under Robert's rules.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear, we're not just saying you got to either vote yes or no. You still have the other options available to you. That you traditionally would. And can you go back to slide 1 for just a second? I did have one question.
Yes, and while we're doing that, Representative Goulet, I did, after I made the slide, and then Representative Reed made a comment in the SharePoint document, similar, just bringing up the yes or no, that I do think it's best to just change that language. So we can do that.
Just a thought on this one here, and I don't have a preference. I'm sorry, it would be the second slide. On this. Yes, maybe it was the third one. We went through more slides.
These are the ones we've done so far.
There was one that said that it had to be separate. Oh, yes, this was it. So, like, I just want to give an example here. We may not need to say calling for legislative action.
Okay.
So, like, let's look at the legacy admission one, because that's a concrete example we can use. We as a board endorse ending legacy admissions. As a board through resolution. We didn't mention legislative action anywhere. This would seem to require that we had to say we're going to submit legislative action. I don't think that's necessary. I think if we approve a resolution in support of the concept, which has got to be thoroughly researched, we still then have to vote to approve the bill. So what I don't want to do is have us take up an issue, vote out a resolution, and then let's say we come back 6 months later because people are still working on legislation. And then we have to decide at the time of a resolution that we're saying we should submit legislation. Because we may not know whether we want to or not at that point. We may want to work further on it. And then we're really binding our hands to then have to do another resolution. So I would recommend taking out
That
that.
whole sentence?
Well, I think you just have to pass a state resolution on supporting the issue, not saying in there, right there, that
Well, I don't.
The calling for legislative
Calling
action, you just
for
wanna make it legislative
action.
mandated that the resolution
calls for it. I think it's on the issue, it supports the spirit and intent of the legislation. But I think we want to give ourselves time, if we want, to consider whether we want to do legislation or not, because we don't need to in all cases. And that doesn't need to be decided when we approve the resolution. And it may disadvantage us to put that requirement in there.
Are you saying that it should say, there must be a separate state resolution calling for legislative action to any proposed state board legislation?
No, I would just say that there must be a separate state resolution on the issue of the legislation in support or in furtherance of the issue that was discussed. Using, for example, what we did on legacy emissions. We passed as a board something saying we support ending legacy emissions in the District of Columbia. We didn't say in there, and we should do a bill on this too.
But if they decided next year to do a bill on it, you don't want them to have to go back and also do a resolution.
At the same time,
Saying to call for,
Call,
the resolution's already done.
all right, the resolution's done, and we expressed our intent, which was to end legacy emissions. So then the bill still has to be voted on though, so we still need 9 votes for the bill. So it's not like you're gonna get rid of that requirement altogether. I just think this, we run into trouble for this because we may very much support an issue. Like, for example, HVACs. We have something on clean air and HVACs that Representative Williams put out. Now, we may 6 months from now decide we want to do something legislatively, but when we're voting on this resolution in 2 weeks, I don't think you should have to say we either do or don't support doing legislation on the issue of clean air and improving HVAC systems. I think that ties our hands and it's just unnecessary. That's my thought.
I don't understand. Okay, the second paragraph describes everything. Right?
I'm really just concerned with the first sentence.
Okay, but I don't.
But it affects the
What do
second
you wanna
part,
say?
yeah. I think this whole, if you all want to change the first sentence, then this whole section needs to be updated kind of to reflect that, which we can do.
Yeah, again,
But I don't know that it does, because let's again use legacy emissions. So the state resolution described
Yeah,
in there the purpose of why it was important to end legacy emissions. It described why it was
We're
needed.
talking about this, right? What do you think the first sentence should say? Because the second paragraph describes what a state resolution is. To everything you need to have a state resolution.
Well,
So do we need the first sentence? I'm sorry,
no, I mean, I
should shut up.
so no, you shouldn't.
you ask questions, you want clarification?
So for me, and I should have caught this the first time, because I did read this through, and I just didn't catch it when I read it the first time. I would say here, there must be a separate state resolution.
Period.
In furtherance of the issue, like, it's gotta be related to the issue. I mean, there's gotta be some good faith in this. And then just say the state resolution, must describe the purpose, which it does. I mean, like, for example, on clean air, it describes the purpose of why we would be doing the bill. We want clean air.
Right, that's what it does.
I think everything in that paragraph is fine.
I do too. I just don't think you need the other sentence.
You just want to strike the whole first sentence.
Yeah.
All right. I'm
Look, the whole person is gone.
Okay,
Just
that resolution must describe the purpose of proposed legislation, okay. That, and it could just be, in that second, all those actions could be in a resolution for an issue. So like, if we're taking HVAC, we can plug that in, and then that gives the board an opportunity to pick up legislation every day. I like that.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was kind of like the double resolution.
If you can please go back to the. Actually, we can go to the forward, yeah. Are there any other comments? Yeah, okay, so let's move on.
Okay.
Finally, this post-approval process, which is the third step. I also have some clarifying language here after the legislation has been voted on and approved for transmission, which is something members wanted to clarify. The state board staff will have 3 business days to submit it through the council's legislative information management system. We've removed the sentence about the chairperson and deciding, and we've clarified that after transmission, the legislation may be referred to a council committee by the chairperson. Again, let me just say, these slides don't have the full text. So when I get to the next steps, that will include me updating the language based on what everyone said, so that everybody can see this all in one place.
Question. Let's say, and this kind of goes back, and I'm sorry, going back for a little bit, but like, let's say there was a resolution that was drafted, and at the time, there was no call for legislative action. Could there be like in a working session, somebody just do a motion to say like, oh, like, we moved to draft legislation and that happened too, like using Robert's rules. Is that an outlet?
So I think this goes back to the paragraph we were just on. It says we don't have to call for legislation for the board to draft legislation.
Right.
And that is
Right, and I would just say like process wise, because it's while we're here.
Right.
But in order to have a piece of legislation, it has to, like all the procedures, that it has to go through the internal process first.
My question is, can somebody put a motion on the table of working session and say, I move that we have legislation for HVAC? Is that still an okay thing to do? Otherwise,
I mean, you can move to have the
I think-
legislation go through the process, right?
As long as there's a resolution
Right.
that exists on the same topic.
Yeah.
okay.
It can't just be like a
At that
random.
time, we would have to be
Yeah,
like.
you can't
so
go
then-
backwards. You can't say, I want legislation without a resolution. Basically what they're saying. That's all.
Okay, so in that case, if that was a motion that come up at a working session, basically that member would have to, or the committee, or it will be referred to committee would draft a resolution that lays out the issue and calls for resolution, and calls for legislation.
I think we're striking that the resolution needs to say there needs to be legislative action on this issue.
Yeah, but I'm just saying like, again, if, let's say Eric did nurses
Mhm.
and Eric did not call out he was like, I want to pick up the issue of nurses.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh yeah, let's talk about all things nurses, whereas blah, 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 blah. And then like, let's say 2025, if he had not done what he did, like, it was like, oh, actually, we need legislation on this. Could he just at the table in the working session, like put forward a motion saying, I think the board should draft legislation?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I'm asking. Like, is Robert Rules still able to be used? I think that's how we got into this. So we're not using Robert Rules to make all of the motions that we can make.
Well, no, I mean, that's not how we got it. We got into, there was no process laid out for the state board to transmit legislation. And so as the staff is drafting that, we can add it to the SOPs and the bylaw. But currently, based on the last iteration of the bylaw, like, you all can vote in working sessions on everything except for state resolution.
On a state resolution.
And you can't vote on a state resolution to pass it in working session.
So we can vote, we want to do a state.
Yeah, like, so like,
resolution.
just like
My
we vote-
question, like, can we put, I think the clarity is, we should be able to use our rules to just say, like, this is an action the board wants to take.
That is
Yeah.
actually already in the bylaw. That is
Okay.
why we vote on, that is why you all vote on capital projects now, that is why things are voted on, that go to committee now. All those things happen in the working session after the set of bylaws. Yeah, all of it was Robert and I and Aaron and Darren, who worked very hard to include those things.
Okay, that's the issue.
Okay.
And everybody was in on it. Sorry.
Eric, go ahead.
I have a hyper technical amendment I would recommend this. So right after business days, I would put a comma, and then I would say of which council is in session, and then another comma. And the reason is, it's our meetings don't neatly align with the recess. We wouldn't want to have a situation where council was on recess, we were unable to submit legislation, board staff couldn't submit it within the 3 business days. So maybe we just.
We can't still turn it.
All right, well, they can work out the grammatical.
No, you said, you can't, the comma doesn't go there.
Another hypothetical question I didn't know.
The punctuation side, you see my point, is we just don't want to have a situation where council's in recess. We have a meeting, we say, let's submit this legislation, we vote on it, and then the staff can't send it down because council can't accept the bills during recess.
We can add that language
Somewhere,
we'll figure out what the grammatically correct way to add it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate all of that.
But surely we cannot, like, because it's our business, but like, the limb just falls like.
Well, I mean, essentially, you can, I say that, we've only submitted one, but I have no idea if the system actually works when they got it.
Because I think it's like not council, it's our process, so within our 3 business days, we should be transmitting whatever council gets in, that's what.
Right. That is verified, I have no idea.
We can clarify. We can ask
find out.
We can
accept it.
That says that.
What I,
What Colleen is saying is, that says exactly that. 3 business days.
But I guess the question is, is whether or not they even accept legislation in the system when they're on reset. So we can get that information from the council. Yeah,
okay,
I just don't.
if the system is still open, then we can keep it. If it is not open, then we can adjust it.
Okay.
and I'm gonna try to move us along. Are we?
I have one more slide
Yeah,
with next steps. Thank you,
And I will
members,
say, well, did agree that this does not have to come before a vote
which is in the next
next
step.
week at the public meeting. So these edits will have time to be put in.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
All right.
Next steps.
So again, I made these slides before the meeting, so it currently says you would vote on it at the December 11th public meeting, but now that is not the case. The rest is still true, that the staff will finalize this document. I will find a way to incorporate all of the feedback from both last working session and this one. And based on what you have shared with me in writing in the SharePoint documents. I think this applies to any amendments that we also might add in January to the bylaws. We would include a memo as well that explains the purpose of the amendment. That way, when we are posting this on Dropbox for the public, and when you all are having this in your materials, there is, information and backup as always as to why we're doing this. And then you all will review the final version, provide any final feedback, and we'll finalize this for the January 15th public meeting. And if passed, we will then amend the bylaws and or standard operating procedures as necessary and relevant. We're also going to go through and figure out exactly where each of these things would go to include this process. Are there any questions about the next steps?
No, ma'am.
And we can't see the Zoom, so I don't know if people, members online have questions, but you can also unmute yourselves, members online.
I see no hand on this particular situation. So with that being, we're going to move to our next one, which is recognizing 2024 National Blue Ribbon Schools. I'll kind of speak to it if you would like to, because I can suggest it.
About who speaks to which.
Okay, very much. I appreciate that I had gone off script, so I will say that it is right there. But we recently had some Blue Ribbon schools, I believe 4 schools recognized in this both charter and gift schools that were recognized as Blue Ribbon schools. I think that's an amazing achievement, especially coming out of some of the pandemic and all the other things. While I was touring Banneker a little while back, I looked into their case and I saw that they had been recognized when they were a Blue Ribbon school, the year they were recognized. I still think they're Blue Ribbons 3 times, but I saw a resolution from this body recognizing them. I think it is a great idea that we put together the resolution. I actually took a picture of it so I can transmit that to our staff, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. but that we recognize them as soon as possible, because some of those schools are in communities that some of our members who are will be outgoing. And I want to give us the opportunity to recognize those. So that's my whole speech. It's just about.
Where are the four schools? I thought you had.
So it was two schools in DC. It was Payne and DC by So Payne Elementary and Ward 6 and DC by well, I'm not quite sure. But that's what
I thought we had one night. Okay, two.
I thought Whittier.
That's what that said. Whittier did. Whittier is in that.
I'm according to Trent. I can look it up and see now the email.
Okay.
They sent us with the announcement, they were not.
Okay.
Maybe previous.
Whittier was as well. That would have been, because Whittier was one of the reasons why I got recognized, because I know Whittier is one of your schools. So if you confirm that, huh?
Tis that.
Is that. So, if we can just make sure that we have the right number, but those that have been recognized as Blue Ribbon schools, I would like to give them, a resolution, so to speak, ceremony resolution, for that achievement. And that is the gist.
Are we gonna invite them to the meeting?
We can, but I was thinking that we could actually go through their school. That we can pass them and vote on them, but then actually present them to the schools. It would be great. And this was my thought process, because it involves you, that we could take them to that school and recognize that
And
school.
so according to the Department of Education and the advisor, there were two district schools recognized as 2024 National Blue Ribbon Schools. DC bilingual for the charter school and Payne Elementary.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. And we'll recognize
And that's
those.
Ward 5 and Ward 6.
We'll recognize those schools. Thank you.
Whittier.
It's a vote. That's it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
And also, you all want to say to me, maybe not have them all done by next week. But yeah.
I think we're going to do, Blue Ribbon,
Okay.
and congratulate the folks. So that's the gist of, my, hope there's no questions. Seeing none, I'm moving to the next, SR, 24-27, on the comprehensive and, induction and mentoring program for new teachers in the District of Columbia. That would be Representative Rachel Leary.
You all have it in front of you. We've talked about it. It's a great idea. I hope that, it passes in the council. It also will incorporate partnership with OSSI, which I think is very important.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to keep us moving. We have next, SR 24-28, addressing HVAC issues in the schools. President Meyer.
Yeah, so as you are all familiar with, the Green New Deal for Schools is something that I have been working on a lot for the last few years. And one of the components of that is infrastructure, and having infrastructure that can keep up with climate disasters and any issues that come with the changing climate in DC. One or two of those issues that both relate to HVAC systems are extreme heat, which is coming much more prevalent in the district, and also air quality, both of which can be mitigated and or addressed by having functional HVAC systems, which don't exist in many schools. And the district has a complex relationship with maintaining HVAC systems, especially because DGS is in charge of it, and they often what they say that is done in student experience is not actually done, and there don't seem to be many means for accountability. Like just the dissonance between what is said, what DGS publishes as public information compared to what student experiences is like really different and really strong. And having dysfunctional HVAC makes it really hard to learn, especially as the climate crisis worsens. So I think that this would be a relatively direct step to progressing on that issue. It obviously would not fix everything, and there's a lot that would need to be done with funding to fully address the issue, but I do think this is a good first step, and I'm curious as to what you're all.
I think Representative Williams mentioned something that you're kind of holding off on. What's the separate piece, like, what's the big?
Yeah, so this is part of an effort to address the climate disaster plans resolution or demand in the Community Over Schools resolution. The other part of this, and they go hand in hand to an extent, is amending, like setting up for the emergency response plan and management guide to be amended every 15 years or so, because it is what all schools across the city use to craft their own unique emergency response plans. It's like 400 pages. It's this huge long document dictating the standards for what they need to do. And it was made in 2010 because of a collaboration between like 10 different agencies, which is great. And it seemed to be really comprehensive for the time. Our issue is that there are no passages for it to be amended based on climate disasters. And some of it doesn't have to be changed, like fire plans are pretty straightforward. But things like heat and flooding and air quality that are like the scientific community has come to a consensus that like those are evolving threats. There is no way for the plan and management guide to be amended now directly. So that was basically saying that every 15 years, you get this interagency working group or whatever they call themselves together, and you add a section about climate change, and you look at the threats of climate change, and you decide what to do to fix that. And I wasn't at the committee meeting, but they decided to move it to the next month, which I'm okay with. So, yeah.
Right.
When we talk about high quality schools, we don't have high quality buildings.
Certainly not.
And the buildings, even the brand new buildings, like Roosevelt, one of my high schools, it's about 14 years old. And the HVAC system has never worked right in 14 years. And you're talking about accountability. There's no accountability. That's the biggest problem. I think that the last paragraph is unfinished in the resolution.
Yeah.
Needs to have some scary language in it.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I appreciate that, sir. Dr. Lee.
In developing your scary language, I would say maybe adding something related to like identifying sustainable systems. So I'm thinking about like Turner was a recent HVAC issue that I received as the winter months are changing. And then usually I get the same call when the summer months are coming back. And I think what they identified was like the HVAC systems are, I can't remember, the buildings, basically they've aged to the point that like they can't even find the parts. And so what happens is it's like Band-Aid solutions. And what happens is then sometimes the Band-Aid, you can't find the parts of the Band-Aid. And so it ends up like an HVAC that has like created by one person, but then it has like this one part from another place anywhere. Something like sustainable systems so that we can prevent that or ask for a whole replacement, which I know probably be pricey versus doing these like patchworks. I don't know, but that's some of the issues, like literally like this one system has all these components and sometimes there's a supply chain issue. I think a lot of good work came out during the pandemic with like air quality. So you might want to steal some language from or borrow some language from that in the spirit of plagiarism. There has been work done about like the DGS tracking. So that system, like, I don't know if it's helpful to, like, should we establish like some time frames of like, they're supposed to track an issue, but then the issue can just say progressing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not helpful to know that it's progressing. It's progressing for like a year and a half. So maybe like regular updates. I don't know. Or can we just do a bold statement of asking like, can you fix all this? Or what you can't fix, say why you can't fix it, and then what's your plan for like resolve, like the patchwork, but let's turn this HVAC. I'm not even gonna bank on that getting fixed anytime soon because it's such a hodgepodge case, but like, we can avoid people getting upset about a broken HVAC. They at least know why they're gonna have this issue every year. And at least a trajectory of like how it'll get fixed.
Part of the problem is also that they say it's fixed and it's not actually fixed. So having some type of,
Closer.
yeah, like it's resolved. And if you go in the building, you can immediately tell that it is not resolved.
So I literally have an email in my account from Councilman James Lewis George's staff saying from an issue from Anacostia, not HVAC, but another issue of like, we thought we moved beyond, literally sometimes it'd be a technical way that, or there'll be a way that this building staff writes up a work order. And then DGS will literally come in and like say like, well, we fixed the literal issue. And it's like, well, DGS, you are the technicians. Like if a school says it's broken, you can't just say, well, I have it running and there's still a broken component. So they were literally pushing back against DGS in email about, you know, I thought we moved beyond this. They basically are digging schools for having technicalities and saying that they go and look at the one thing and like, oh, that's fixed. And it's like, no, there's an underlying issue here. So like, we want to professionalize and empower DGS to, you know, like, don't just look at what the school system type because they're not HVAC experts.
Yeah.
But you all go and do like a stroke right now, what's happening.
Right there.
I don't wanna make it wait longer if you don't want to, but we do have a panel in January that might.
Yeah.
I could also share some of the prep research, for that you might.
That would be good.
So I really think this is great. I want to commend all the hard work and I supported the committee. I do have some just minor concerns with the wording. I tried to work offline within the next couple of weeks. I'm better on. I think it would be beneficial if we met with, I know the government representative over at DGS, Michelle Long, and she's very good job. But just to maybe sit down and have a meeting with her on some of the language here, because what I want to make sure we're doing on here is, first of all, not like some of the phraseology, like heat in classrooms significantly impairs students' ability to learn, frequent exposure to poor air quality is known to have negative health effects. And then, you know, on the last page, unhealthy air quality, a danger ECPS is already facing. I don't want to put something out that paints a perspective that's broad without using specific examples. Like if we have a school where we tested and we've specifically found there's heat issue, a mold issue, let's cite those examples, but I don't want to paint the air quality ECPS with broad brush, because then parents may get alarmed. You know, when across the board, it may be fine, but we may have isolated examples of problems. Like for instance, out here, the unhealthy air quality, a danger DCPS has already faced is referencing the wildfires that we faced, which was a significant issue of air quality. But it doesn't provide that context here. So when we say like a danger DCPS faced is unhealthy air quality, that may lead parents to believe there's an issue within the schools with air quality. So I just like to kind of, you know, finesse that language a bit so we don't alarm parents on that front. And then, you know, when it says, you know, whereas the overall neglect of HVAC systems and general maintenance in schools contributes directly to poor health and learning conditions in schools. Like I want to give examples, like I want to be able to say, here's a list of things that we really do need to prioritize and we need to fix. Because again, then it's just generally painted as we have poor air in our schools. Now, if that's true, let's absolutely call it out. But I have not seen a study saying our schools have across the board poor air, whether it be charters or DCPS. So I just think sitting down with DGS, and I'm going to arrange the meeting, would be beneficial. And you know, if after Representative Mayor meets with them, she decides she wants to wait until January, then we have the benefit panel too, which I don't think would be bad to have public testimony that could further add detail to this, because that's kind of typically what we do. But I just want to commend her on the resolution. I think it's absolutely getting us to a good place. But I think we should meet with DGS and talk through with them, because I think overall they do a pretty good job of road workers. I think there's room for improvement, but overall I think they do pretty well. When you report it, they come and fix it. I don't think you have a different take on it.
I'm gonna come, one moment, I'll come here because I want you to review it. respond to what Representative Boulay said. Then we'll come to Madam President, if it's at our hand, ready for twice, and then I'll come back to you, Representative here. So ma'am.
Yeah, I think that all sounds good. I am all for meetings and for like for statistics and everything to defend it. I will say that like this does come after having like with my peers that you know at school that was having done like a year of like I know that it's not reflected here, but we've met with a lot of people from BGS and we've met with a lot of people from the city who also recognize that this is a problem. I do agree that it should be better outlined here, but it's not, I just want to clarify that this isn't an issue that we like made up. And I know that's not what you're saying. But I'm confident that the data we're looking for is out there. And I honestly think that if I dug through the research that we already have, I could probably find it. But I am totally in support of sitting down either with you or not and talking to DGS and getting their perspective as well.
Madam President.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I put in the chat, it might be helpful to look back at some of the definitions we use in healthy school facilities reports, because we did the homework of figuring out what was already on the books and what was required. We also did our best to think about, I would say, precise language for how we categorize a healthy school that is both reflective of the whole and I would say, I don't know, we use what alarming, scary, all the things, but that some of that can add to your homework as far as things that are helpful context, as far as and that was kind of coming out of the pandemic. So in addition to the other air quality report things, I think we can pull some helpful language and context from that.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'll come back to you, Representative Cleary.
Y'all, excuse me. We all have schools in our ward that are horribly working. That have all, I mentioned Whittier. Whittier's a blue ribbon school or green ribbon school, whatever. And it would fit into when Representative Goulet was talking about, we need such as. All right, Whittier, I could take you to Whittier and I could give you 20 such as, all of them different. That had to do with air quality, mold, had to do with all kinds of things, bricks falling off the roof, all these other things, right? Our schools are not in good shape. The new schools have problems because their HVAC systems are computerized, but the people that work in the schools don't know how to do the computers because they're old time custodians, right? So that I think the such as is that you were mentioning is what we need to put in there. Like the thing about the air quality when they had the Canadian fires and stuff like that. You know, that's something that should be recognized. But to think that our schools are not filled with all kinds of hazards, that's very naive to think that in all the wards. And so we need to, as I said earlier, it needs to be very, very strong language. But the such as would probably satisfy what you're talking about.
I don't want to hop for you. So yeah, I appreciate that. And I think those examples will really help because I think there are specific examples of schools that are really concerning. Whittier's a great example of that. Yeah, I've got some in my ward where we have trailers that I think we can put those also in the resolve clauses. If we have a list of concerns we have and we don't feel there's adequate capital funds in place to make those repairs on a horizon that we think meets the urgency of the concerns, then we can say be it resolved, because that's the part we're still working on here, is we can say be it resolved that funding should be added for the following projects where air quality is an issue. And Whittier, maybe it's an example, better than I do, Representative O'Leary, if it's funded in the horizon of the capital budget in a way that you're comfortable with, but I've heard the horror stories of Whittier. So I think that would be an example of something that we would want to say be resolved, that either the mayor and council should provide funding to improve air quality systems at the following schools. In putting Whittier on the list, for example. So this type of thing I'm thinking is just how do we take this from a general concern to then actionable steps and resolve clauses where we try to then state with this budget coming up that funds should be provided to solve the issue we're talking about.
If that specificity is what is important. And this could be another page and a half of a resolution just by doing that.
And my only thing I would say is that I know this was voted out of committee, but building on what President Thompson said, as a part of like the research of doing the resolutions, if there is way to reference like previous things, like the healthy school, because like that was we got a whole grant to pay for the research of what constitutes a healthy school, what are the standards. Just to try to be intentional about connecting the work of the board throughout all of the resolutions so that there's a through line and that pieces of work are forgotten or like old resolutions. And it may be helpful that as we're thinking about, we have a resolution tracker on the SBOE website that tracks all of our resolutions going back, I don't want to say 2014, but a long time. Where like you can search what are the resolutions that were passed, you can put it up, you can do a word search. And that may be also helpful. So clearly what may have been an issue in 2018 may not have been an issue, but if it was, and here we now are in 2024, we need to note that it still is repeated and it hasn't been, so I think that it strengthens the resolution, and the next steps and actions that may be called for.
One thing,
Well, that's been, go right ahead, sir.
I'm not trying to beat the dead horse or whatever, but for the last 3 years, when I've testified about DGS and about buildings, and I've gone back into my computer, all I did was change the date. It was the same testimony in 2020, 2019, 2021, for the same schools and everything like that. So this is very important that we call out those who are not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
One last comment.
One last time. I think we gotta be intentional in how we do that, Representative Olverigo, because DGS can only fix what's funded, and I think that's what we have to identify as a board. DGS can't go make major repairs to HVAC systems if funds haven't been appropriated for those systems. So I think that's what we need to understand. Are we criticizing the right entity here? Should we be criticizing the mayor and council? Or should we be going after DGS? The DGS repairs what's in the funding queue, but if these systems aren't being funded, are we directing it to the right place? And that's what I think we need to figure out.
Oh, I agree with you completely. I'm not calling out DGS. They just.
Yeah, and maybe it is that, we don't know.
All right. I think we have pretty much exhausted conversation. Are we all minds clear on it so far? Okay. I appreciate that so much. Now, I'm gonna go to 2 resolutions. This year we have 2 outgoing state board members. No, ma'am.
We're not gonna ask you all to edit.
We have 2 people that represent to celebrate, and truly celebrate. I want to emphasize that for the work that they've done over the last 40 years. I know it's been a pleasure for me, so, one is my personal, not so personal, but board representative, who I've been actually working with. And so, and a friend. So, and next week, public meeting, the state board will consider and discuss ceremonial resolutions to recognize their service and their dedication to students, their families, and the community of the District of Columbia. That work has been substantial. We will hear more during the public meeting, but are there any questions or comments from members at this time?
Drafts of the CR will be sent out and you will have the in your inboxes to provide that comment and addition.
Again,
Deletion.
no,
Not,
no.
y'all may get those comments right for Fraser, I'm just saying. Please use comments right.
I know you are not a person who, you know, likes a lot of fluff or anything like that, but I do think it is important to recognize the work you've done. And I would hope you will allow us to do that.
Thank you
Okay?
very much.
All right, see, exactly.
I'll be super humble.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. We know how you feel about those type of things, but, that is something that we're gonna do. With that being said, okay, and I thank you, Director, for taking that part for us. I'm gonna move to probably the best part. Is that what I?
No, we've had some additions.
Oh, I'm sorry. We gotta get
You
that.
got a lot of questions, sir.
Lord. we gotta-
Sorry.
I'm trying my hardest because, okay,
It's a lot to get out to do tonight.
okay, so the changes in the,
So there are additions that were added,
okay,
and there should be 3 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
that is correct.
Okay, the first one is mine are not worded, correctly. You gotta read what you wrote.
You know what, I didn't write it very well, so,
We go to President Thompson.
we go to President Thompson,
Her item.
yes.
So our name.
I'm happy to chime in, and keep us moving. So we have 3, things, that are additions. The first 2 are ceremonial resolutions. One, is for Josephine Bias Robinson. She's currently the outgoing executive director of the Research Practice Partnership. They are having an event to celebrate her, but it is the same evening, I believe, is our public meeting. And so I cannot attend. I'm assuming other members can also not attend, but I would also assume that she would appreciate the recognition of her work. And so I'm asking that we draft a ceremonial resolution just acknowledging the work of the partnership and that she was the first director. The second is a ceremonial resolution for outgoing Ward 7 Council Member Vincent Gray, who was also a former mayor, council chair, and agency head, because a big part of his legacy has been early childhood education. And so I'm asking that those 2 be considered as resolutions at our upcoming public meeting.
Evan Rose, he said, what's the third item?
So I was pausing because those are 2 ceremonials. And so if no one objects, then we'll circulate drafts. The third item was again initially raised by Representative Chang. He had suggested that the board begin a conversation with the AG, Brian Schwab, and the incoming shadow senator, Ankit Jain, because they had begun to look into some of the implications, I would say, of the changing administration. I mentioned in my leadership report that I did get a call from someone in the mayor's office just to see if there were concerns or other things that had come up before the board. And I personally have been asked in my representative capacity at several Ward 7 meetings. And so the question is, if this is something the larger board would want to, I guess, explore or be in conversation around. And I'm asking members to, if so, if there's interest, if they will suggest avenues or voices, avenues to move that conversation forward, or voices to add, voices and resources to add to that conversation. And I am not suggesting that we have to make a decision tonight, but I did want to share that information, given I had gotten a call from the mayor's office. That is the third.
I think we absolutely should. I mean, my preference on this issue would be that our board leadership, and we may have new leadership, maybe the same next time around, but that the board leadership take the active role in this. No, we just insist on having a seat at the table for conversation. So I don't think we need to do anything special or out of the ordinary on this, even if it's an extraordinary situation that we may be facing, because our board leadership should have that seat at the table with the other policymakers in the mayor's office, council. I mean, if the AG is involved, I guess, two there. I don't really know why the AG would be involved in this. But I think we just need to be mindful. And I'm even, concerned about the Congress as much as I am potentially the White House, because there's more of an ability to meddle in some of DC affairs through that. And then obviously the Department of Education, we're denying that Title I funding. So I think we're all aware of these issues here at the board, but I really don't think we need to do anything above and beyond, other than make sure we've got that voice in the room when these discussions are being had, which I think you've done a great job of, Representative Patterson, Executive Director Butler, and our president. So I think we've already got 3 people in those discussions that we need. So I don't think you need to do anything special in this meeting, but.
Representative Green.
Yeah, I would like to echo Representative Goulet's point, and also I think Representative Chang also. I think this is a great opportunity, though I'm not really sure, like, I don't really have any ideas for what to pursue in this collaboration right now, but maybe more ideas will come up in the future, or with the incoming members, they might also have ideas. So.
For me personally, I'm always open to having conversation, but this is a time where there's a lot of uneasiness about what could potentially happen. But I'm also not in the field of speculating about things and raising people's fears. We all know there's potential for things like a control board or other things happening that have been stated people are, concerned about. But I don't want to raise the level of concern unnecessarily, is my opinion. Again, I'm always open to these conversations. I want them to be substantive as opposed to speculative. Because, if we're gonna have these conversations, I want to make sure that they're grounded in something or some type of intel that is factual, not just we're having this conversation and this could potentially happen. I think a lot of people already know what potentially can happen. It's been reported on extensively. And so if we're gonna have this conversation, let's be in these conversations and I just want to make sure that we're speaking from a place of, I've been in this meeting and I'm hearing this potentially is going to be proposed or whatever the case may be. That's my only concern about it. I think these are, we should be prepared as best as we possibly can, be proactive. But also I don't want everyone, oh my God, because he said something during the campaign, this is going to happen because he doesn't like a particular elected official, this is going to happen. I just want to keep us on as much intel as opposed to speculation. That's my only concern.
I got one thing.
Yes, sir.
I turned 80 2 weeks ago. And my philosophy of life has always been that I don't worry about things I can't control. And we spent the whole however many hours tonight talking about schools and students and what we're in charge of on the State Board of Education. Everything that happens when the White House or Capitol Hill is going to happen regardless of what we say. So we need to worry about what we can do for our students, our families, and those people who work in the school. Amen.
Amen.
Any other comments? Okay, I believe we should. If there's no other new business items, let's proceed. As I said, we proceeded with that part. With that being said, and we talked about new business, I want to thank you members for the time and engagement tonight. As a reminder to members and the viewing public, our public meeting is taking place 1 week early. Next week, Wednesday, December 11th at 5:30. The topic of our expert panel is, as we discussed earlier today, cell phones in schools. Members voted on this topic at the October working session. The public meeting will be held in the old council chambers at 441 4th Street, or as we like to say, Miriam F. Berry. It will also be, live streamed on the District Knowledge Network. Members of the public can visit sboe.dc.gov to learn how to submit and present testimony, including through our virtual option. All public witnesses must submit a written copy of their testimony to our staff for public record. Now, seeing no further business before the state board, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. So I've heard so moved by person, in a second, it is seconded by person. All right, aye. Any nays? None. This working session is now adjourned at 8:28 and 41 seconds on December 4th, 20. Thank you.